Chapter 459. It should be said that the overall geomancy of this building was excellent. When Chinese built houses, they had to have their backs to the mountains and rivers. This building was located at the back of a hidden hill. The so-called hidden hill was a small slope of the Earth's vein. It was a hill hidden under the ground, which was why it was called a hidden hill. Of course, hidden hills could be divided into real and fake ones. Some of them were just a small slope, which couldn't be considered a hidden hill. This hidden hill was divided into two veins. One was like a coiling dragon, and the other was like a crouching tiger. In geomancy, this place was called a battle between a dragon and a tiger. In front of the building was a winding road. In geomancy, the road was also considered water, but it was empty water. Moreover, this place had all 5 elements. It was a good place to build a house. It was the best place to build a house. This kind of treasure land was a good place to hide wind and gather wealth. There was no reason for it to kill people as soon as it broke through the ground. However, if there was no problem with the geomancy, what was the problem? After thinking for a while, I stood still and analyzed the geomancy of this place one more time. My brows slowly furrowed. Although the geomancy of this place was good, it didn't show any sign of expelling the old and absorbing the new. What was geomancy? In Guopu's book of Burial from the Jin Dynasty, there was a saying, geomancy is qi. Qi disperses with the wind, and it stops at the water boundary. The ancients gathered it so that it wouldn't disperse, and when it moved, it would stop. That's why it's called geomancy. Geomancy was actually a flow of qi that circulated in the mountains and rivers. The most important part of this flow of qi was circulation. During circulation, it expelled the old and absorbed the new. This was the normal state. Although the geomancy of this place was good, there was no circulation. That was the crux of the problem. After understanding this, my brows didn't relax. Quite the contrary, they furrowed even tighter. Finding the dragon's acupuncture points and calculating the good or bad fortune were all black and white. It was easy to judge. However, there were many possibilities for the stagnation of geomancy. It wasn't easy to find the cause. After thinking for a while, I lifted my head to look at the only hole in the construction site. It was the place to break the ground, and it was also the place to cut the ribbon. Since Dai Nanzhou had asked a famous geomancy master to look at this place, he had to break the ground at the eye of the house. The so-called eye of the house was the key point of the feng shui of the house. If a house was to be built, it was necessary to break the soil at the eye of the house. This was also the fundamental reason for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. When many buildings were being built, there would be company executives or celebrities attending the ribbon-cutting ceremony. In the whole ceremony, the final part was not the ribbon-cutting. Instead, after the ribbon-cutting, a shovel of soil was dug symbolically at the ribbon-cutting site. Do not underestimate this shovel. In feng shui, the first shovel is very important. It can affect the entire feng shui. Dai Nanzhou noticed that I was looking at the pit and said, "This pit is where we started the construction. We asked a feng shui master to check it out. He said that this is the best place to start the construction. Did they make a mistake?" Yes, this place, including the groundbreaking site, has been carefully surveyed by a master. But why is there still so much trouble now? Wu Dinka also said, "Master Zhou, I've long heard from Nanzhou that you are very capable and expert in this field. You should take a good look. The company can't take it anymore." I shook my head and didn't say anything. I used the flipping trigram palm to calculate the location of the pit. It wasn't difficult to calculate the location of the eye of the house. Shortly after, I confirmed that the pit in front of me was where the eye of the house was located. That was why I had chosen the right place to break the soil. If the feng shui of this place was right and the eye of the house was right, where did the trouble come from? I waved my hand to stop Dai Nanzhou and Wu Dunka from asking more questions. I urged the technique in my body to sense the aura around the pit. This place was an auspicious place, and since it was the eye of the house, it should have a wisp of dragon energy. However, after sensing for a long time, I couldn't sense any wisp of dragon energy. Not only that, but there's also a faint wisp of yin energy around the pit. This wisp of yin energy was very weak. If I hadn't deliberately urged the true energy in my body, I wouldn't have sensed it. My eyes focused. This place had excellent feng shui, and it was the eye of the house. It was the key point of this large area. The auspicious place should have abundant yang energy. Why was there a wisp of weak yin energy here? There was definitely something wrong. To solve the doubts in my heart, I retracted my spiritual sense and slowly came to the bottom of the pit. I took out the shovel from my backpack and prepared to dig to find out the truth. Master Zhou, don't do anything. As soon as he saw me take out the shovel, Wu Dunka shouted. He jumped into the pit and grabbed my shovel. Many workers had accidents because they were digging this pit. Master Zhou, you should be careful. Dainan Zhou also reminded him. That's right, Zhou Yi. You should be more careful. Many workers were injured in this pit. Since I had found out that there was a problem with the pit, I didn't have any reason to give up. I smiled and said to them, don't worry. I'll be careful. Although I said so, I didn't care. Although the yin energy that appeared out of nowhere was strange, with my current cultivation base, I wouldn't be too careful. Then I grabbed the shovel and began to dig the small pit in front of me. The pit wasn't big. It was only 1 square meter and half a meter deep. The space was limited. Wu Dunka, who had jumped in earlier, saw that I was determined. He looked at me worriedly and then left the pit. Dainan Zhou, and he looked at me from above. I urged the Tao energy in my body and slowly dug. When I was outside, I felt that the yin energy was very weak. However, the moment the shovel plunged into the ground, I felt that the yin energy had become thicker. After I dug a few times, the yin energy became thicker. At this moment, I didn't even need to sense it. With my naked eyes, I could see the yin energy in the shape of a gray mist. It moved along the shovel and moved like a few light, gray, poisonous snakes. Soon it coiled around my arm. Not only that, but the yin energy also moved along the skin on my arm and seeped into the meridians of my body. Soon, I felt a cold energy spread out from my body. I calmed my mind and didn't hurry to expel it. Instead, I quietly sensed it. This yin energy wasn't strong. It was about the same as a human's early-stage, glorious memory cultivation base. Moreover, it wasn't pure and had a lot of impurities. At least, it was much worse than the yin energy in the corpse sect. This amount and quality of yin energy wasn't enough to harm my body. I quietly stood there and let the yin energy wander in my body and move along my meridians. Yin energy was very sharp. It could help me break through and increase my realm. However, with my current glorious memory cultivation base, this kind of chaotic yin energy wasn't very helpful to me. It was better than nothing. After circulating in my body for 1 day, the yin energy was completely absorbed by the Tao energy in my body. I exhaled and resumed my previous action. I threw the soil that I had just dug out with the shovel. Zhou Yi, you scared me. I thought something happened to you. What happened just now? When the gray mist appeared, Dainan Zhou panicked. Now that I had finally taken action, he asked with a lingering fear in his heart. What's going on? I waved my hand and smiled at him. It's okay. I'm almost sure what the problem is. It should be related to this pit. If the eye of the mansion had such strong yin energy, it meant that there was something wrong with this node. If there was a problem here, the geomancy of this place wouldn't be able to absorb the old and absorb the new. After listening to me, Dainan Zhou's face relaxed a little bit. Wu Dunka, who was next to him, looked a little strange. He stammered and asked me, Master Zhou, what's wrong with this pit? I shook my head. You'll know soon enough. Then I urged my Tao energy and continued to dig. Everything was the same as before. As my hands moved, yin energy flowed through the shovel and spread to my entire body. Moreover, as the pit got deeper, the yin energy inside became thicker and thicker. I waved my hand in the air, and a faint white light curtain appeared in the air. As more and more yin energy emitted from the pit, the surroundings of the pit became more dangerous. Although the yin energy wasn't enough to hurt me, it was enough to hurt Dainan Zhou and Wu Dunka. I used the Tao energy in my body to cover the pit. At the same time, I did the same thing. Every time I dug, I would digest the yin energy inside. On the one hand, it would help my cultivation a little bit. On the other hand, I wanted to prevent the Yin energy from escaping the pit and harming people. As I continued to dig, the corpse energy and Yin energy in front of me became thicker. However, at the same time, I could see a wisp of dragon energy that was as thin as a gossamer. It seemed my previous assumption wasn't wrong. The wisp of dragon energy in this treasure land was forcefully covered by something. Now, it seemed that the thing that had covered the wisp of dragon energy here was this wisp of Yin energy. After digging around 1 meter deep, my shovel suddenly touched something hard. The Yin energy in the soil became thicker than it had ever been. I didn't continue to dig. Instead, I took out the iron shovel in my hand and dug around. After clearing the soil on the surface, a small wooden box appeared in my sight. I carefully picked up the small wooden box and patted the soil on it. At this moment, I sensed that the dragon energy underground had become thicker, and the thick wisp of Yin energy had become as thin as a gossamer. It was obvious that this small wooden box was the thing that had suppressed the wisp of dragon energy in this earth vein. The few lives that had been harmed earlier should have been caused by this thing as well. I carefully used my Tao energy to cover the small wooden box. Then, I smiled at Dainanzhou. I found it. It's the culprit. Dainanzhou was surprised. You found the root of the problem? I nodded. This time, Dainanzhou finally became happy. He grabbed Wu Dunka, who was beside him, and was about to jump up. Wu Dunka was a bit dazed. After a while, he smiled. That's great, Master Zhou. What should we do now? I took the small wooden box and climbed into the pit. I quickly set up a simple formation to suppress ghosts. Then, I put the small wooden box on the ground. Dainanzhou and Wu Dunka were ordinary people. They didn't know how to cast spells. To prevent the evil spirit from hurting them, I had to be careful. After doing all that, I quietly urged the Tao energy in my body and slowly opened the small wooden box in front of me. The three of us didn't dare to blink. It was obvious that we were curious about what was inside the small wooden box. The answer was soon revealed. The wooden box contained a small glass bottle with some oily liquid and a few strands of hair. Dainanzhou looked puzzled. Ah, Zhou, what is this? I opened the small bottle. I could smell the stench of a corpse and thick corpse energy. Perhaps the others didn't know what it was, but I could recognize it at first glance. It's corpse oil. When I was in school, I had seen Professor Dengmeng refine baby corpse oil. How could I not recognize it now? Dainanzhou didn't understand geomancy. Corpse oil? How could there be corpse oil here? Also, is the corpse oil the cause of the geomancy of this place? When I dug up the box, I had a guess. Seeing the corpse oil in the small bottle confirmed my guess. This place used to be an auspicious house. Living here could bring good fortune to their descendants. However, if this kind of ghost was buried in the eye of the house, it would stop the flow of geomancy. The auspicious house would become ominous, and the murderous aura would overflow. Dainanzhou's series of misfortunes were all because of this. However, I still had some doubts. This method of harming people wasn't smart. Moreover, it seemed the ghost cultivation base wasn't high. Why did so many geomancy masters shake their heads and say that they couldn't solve it? Chapter 460. These questions didn't seem to have any clues, but as long as we found the right method, it wasn't difficult. The corpse oil and hair in the small bottle were obviously used to raise a little ghost. Judging from the thick yin qi from before, the little ghost was still residing in the small bottle. As long as he summoned it, searched its soul, and interrogated it, it wouldn't be difficult to get the answer. I briefly explained the situation to Dainanzhou and Wu Zholi. After listening to the whole story, Dainanzhou was enraged. He stomped his feet and cursed. Which bastard is so vicious? Zhou, can you find out who it is? I must kill him. Dainanzhou, who had always been elegant, began to curse. It was clear how angry he was. However, Wu Dunka, who was next to him, didn't agree with my words. Since this small bottle can affect the geomancy of this place, I believe it must be very powerful. Many workers were injured, but Brother Zhou, how come nothing happened to you? I shook my head. This thing doesn't have a high cultivation base. Of course, it can't hurt me. Although the yin energy from the small pit wouldn't hurt me, it would be fatal to ordinary people. If I hadn't used my Tao energy to wrap the small wooden box, Dai Nanzhou and Wu Dunka would have been dead. Wu Dunka still looked skeptical. He opened his mouth and wanted to ask something, but Dai Nanzhou raised his hand to stop him. Dai Nanzhou and I were old classmates. It wasn't the first time he had seen me solve this kind of problem. Of course, he trusted me unconditionally. He smiled at Wu Dunka. "Brother Wu, you haven't seen Zhou Yi's ability. He's an expert in dealing with this kind of thing." With that, Dai Nanzhou patted my shoulder and said seriously, "Zhou Yi, I'll leave this matter to you. You must help me find the culprit. Otherwise, even if I find the problem, I won't dare to start work here. Who knows what kind of trouble will happen?" I nodded. Of course, there's no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. Don't worry, that person can't run away. At this moment, I had digested all the yin energy in the small wooden box. As for the little ghost inside, it wasn't suitable to summon it in broad daylight. It wasn't that I didn't have the ability to summon it, but the yang energy in broad daylight was too strong. I was afraid that the little ghost wouldn't be able to endure it. I wasn't in a hurry. After explaining the situation, I went to a nearby hotel with Dai Nanzhou and the others. The matter had been resolved, and the construction site had regained its dragon energy. Soon, they would be able to start working again. Dai Nanzhou was overjoyed. He pulled me along and drank a lot of wine. He even told me, with an evil smile, that he would take me out to have some fun. His face had an expression that said, "You know what I mean?" Having ventured into the business world of Nanzhou for so many years, he was probably already familiar with these things. His words were quite nonchalant. I didn't care much about such things, but I had Lao Ai in my heart. All these years, she had done so much for me, even willing to pay the price of being unable to advance her cultivation for the rest of her life, just for the opportunity to see me. She didn't betray me, so I naturally can't betray her. Dai Nanzhou saw that I was a little sad, but he didn't force me. He calmly changed the topic and asked, "What do you want to do next?" I thought for a moment, then asked, "Is there a place that sells funeral items around here?" Since we had left in a hurry, I didn't prepare many things. When the sky turned dark, I would have to summon the evil spirit's soul. The things I needed to summon the spirit, such as cinnabar and karmic water, would have to be bought locally. Although that little ghost cultivation wasn't high, I wasn't raising him. If I wanted to summon him, I would have to use some soul summoning methods. Dai Nanzhou smiled and said, "Hong Kong's feng shui is much thicker than that of the mainland, so it's easy to buy these things. There's a street with funeral items nearby that sells all kinds of funeral items." Then, Dai Nanzhou asked Wu Dunka to drive us to that street. Sure enough, after 10 minutes, I saw a street that was several miles long. It was filled with all kinds of funeral-related items. After getting out of the car and buying the materials to make the soul-summoning tools, I didn't linger and directly asked Dai Nanzhou to take me back to the hotel. At this moment, the sky was dark, and it was time to perform the soul-summoning ceremony. I opened the small bottle that contained the evil spirit and placed it on the table. Then, I urged my Tao energy and used the weasel brush to write a spell on a piece of yellow paper. With my current realm, summoning a soul couldn't be any easier. After a few strokes, a simple soul-summoning banner was completed. At the same time, I used a piece of white paper to make a small person. It was similar to the item that President he had used to store Guomingming's soul. This item was perfect for storing souls. After doing all that, I quietly urged the Tao technique to summon the spirit. Not long after, a faintly discernible ghost appeared in the distance, faintly drifting over to them. It was an evil spirit. Its entire body exuded an evil aura. Its hair was disheveled, and its eyes were bloodshot. From its bloodshot eyes, I could tell that it had killed many people. When it was around 10 meters away from me, the evil spirit halted and said angrily, "Why did you summon me? Did you devour my yin qi?" The yin energy around the small bottle had been used up. Of course, the ghost could sense it. I didn't answer him, but said coldly, "I have something to ask you. I hope you can answer me truthfully." Before summoning the spirit, I had thought it through. If this ghost had a bad fate and had no choice but to harm others, as long as it was willing to cooperate with me, perhaps I would be kind enough to send it to the cycle of reincarnation. However, it seemed that this little ghost had committed a lot of crimes and didn't need to worry about it anymore. I felt disgusted, and my tone became impatient. This kind of evil spirit would be a disaster if I kept it around. You swallowed my energy, and you want me to cooperate with you? Give me back my energy first. This evil spirit had killed too many people, and it was hot-tempered. It didn't seem to want to cooperate with me. I didn't deny it. It's okay if you don't want to cooperate with me. After I capture you, I will use the soul-searching seal on you. It will have the same effect. Don't you dare. My words had thoroughly enraged the evil spirit. He roared ferociously and opened his bloody mouth, revealing a mouthful of white fangs. Then he stretched out his 2 claws and attacked me. This ghost was really fast. Although it was just a remnant soul, its speed was fast. I could only see an afterimage in the air. It dashed toward me like a hurricane. This ghost had swallowed a lot of souls, and its cultivation base wasn't bad. When it attacked, it was quite intimidating. However, its cultivation base was just child's play in my eyes. I didn't even bother to use the 9-star astral steps. I just raised my hand and drew something in front of me, mumbling seal. Recently, as my cultivation base had increased, I could use many one-word formulas that only the heavenly masters could use. This seal formula was one of them. When I was in front of my house, the heavenly master of the Liu family had used the seal formula on me. At that time, I was confined there, and I couldn't even think of resisting. The ghost in front of me wasn't much better than I was at that time. When the seal formula was used, the curves of space would be compressed and twisted. No matter if it was a human or a ghost, they couldn't escape. The spirit was still in the posture it had used to pounce on me. However, the space around it had been compressed to the extreme. The originally human-sized spirit had been compressed to the size of a bamboo pole. The expression on its face had been twisted, and it was as ugly as it could be. Being compressed by the curves of space in a narrow space gave people a suffocating feeling. The strong pressure could even make people forget their survival instincts. The ghost was forcefully compressed into a small space. As the curves of space twisted, its body became smaller and smaller, and the suffocating feeling became stronger. At this moment, it couldn't even talk. It could only wait for my judgment. In front of absolute power, the ghost couldn't struggle. The curves of space continued to compress the ghost. From the size of a bamboo stick, it was now as thick as a matchstick. After a while, this thing's soul would perish, and it would never be able to reincarnate. The ghost's face couldn't show any emotions anymore. However, its eyes were filled with fear and begging. I waved my hand and lifted the seal. The twisted space in front of me slowly returned to normal. The ghost, which had been compressed to the size of a matchstick, slowly regained its strength and returned to its original size. It looked frightened. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. If you have anything to ask, just ask. I'll tell you everything I know. This ghost had been tortured badly. I believe that it wouldn't dare to lie to me. Who raised you? Why did you come here to harm people? This ghost cultivation base wasn't high. It was only at the level of Shiyao. Ordinary feng shui masters couldn't deal with it. However, Hong Kong's geomancy was rich, and they didn't lack experts in this field. Whether it was the Wang Group or Li Chenghui, they had enough capital to hire experts. But why couldn't those feng shui masters deal with this ghost? I was curious. Did this ghost have some abilities that I didn't know? Or the person who raised him wasn't an ordinary person? That was why so many feng shui masters didn't dare to attack him. After hearing my question, the ghost shook its head, its face bewildered. I don't know. Then, as if it was afraid that I wouldn't believe it, it got on its knees and cowed out. Please believe me. I don't know where I came from. I was a little angry. There are ghosts in this world that don't know where they came from. What a joke. This evil ghost had harmed a lot of people, and its evil energy was strong. If I let it go, it would continue to harm people. Since it didn't want to cooperate with me, I didn't need to be polite with it. Then, I used the soul-searching seal on the ghost. The soul-searching seal was a method to obtain the memories of a ghost. After using it, the memory of the ghost's past and present life would flash in the mind of the user like a movie. However, not long after using it, the ghost would slowly wither until it died. However, after using the soul-searching seal, I was even more surprised. The ghost didn't have any memories of its previous life or the time before it came to the construction site. Those memories were vague and couldn't be found. Someone had purposely erased them. However, the part of its memory after it came to the construction site was complete. I could clearly see that it was in a small bottle. A man in a suit carried it to the construction site and buried it in a deep pit. I zoomed in on the ghost's memory and studied the man holding the small bottle. Chapter 461. After seeing the person's face clearly, I took a deep breath, and even my spine broke out in a cold sweat. It's hard to guard against a thief in the family. I was a little hesitant, but in order to figure out the whole thing, I knocked on Dainanzho's door. "Zhou-yi, weren't you summoning the spirit? Are you done already?" Dainanzhou was surprised when he opened the door and saw me. He let me in as he spoke. "Are you the only one in the room?" After entering the door, I glanced around and asked Dainanzhou. After getting an affirmative answer from him, I used my Taoist energy to seal the entire room so that outsiders couldn't hear any sounds in the room. "Zhou-yi, what's wrong with you? Why are you being so mysterious?" Dainanzhou was a little surprised by my strange behavior, and his tone became solemn. I sat down in the living room of the suite and lit a cigarette. I said seriously, "Tell me about this Wu Dunka. This person is a veteran of the company. He followed my uncle to build the company more than 10 years ago. My uncle has always relied on him. This person is also very popular in the company." Dainanzhou seemed to have noticed something from my solemn expression. He changed the topic and said, "Zhou-yi, what do you mean? Are you suspecting Wu Dunka? How is that possible?" I smiled and said, "Why can't it be him?" Dainanzhou looked confident. "Wu Dunka is a veteran of the company, and he is my uncle's right-hand man. He spared no effort to help me with the development of the real estate. Before you came, he stayed in the hospital for more than a week because of overwork. His feelings for the company are obvious to everyone in the company. He would never do such a thing." Dainanzhou was a smart person. At this moment, he had already understood the meaning in my voice. I took another puff of the cigarette. This world is full of deception. The person you trust the most may also be your biggest enemy. "Zhou-yi." Dainanzhou raised his voice and shook his head. "I don't believe it. Wu Dunka is definitely not the one who lured that evil thing here. Not to mention that Wu Dunka is a senior member of the company and has a close relationship with my uncle and me. He doesn't even know any Taoist magic. How could he use such an insidious method?" After getting along with me for so many years, Dainanzhou had never doubted me. His words today also proved that he really trusted Wu Dunka. However, the truth was right in front of him, and he had no choice but to believe it. In the kid's memory, the man in the suit who buried the small bottle on the construction site was Wu Dunka. "Nanzhou, do I really need evidence before you'll believe me?" I could see that Dainanzhou respected Wu Dunka a lot. That's why I didn't care about his suspicion towards me. I just stared into his eyes and said, "Seeing is believing. Unless you can produce evidence, unless Wu Dunka personally admits it, I don't believe that Wu Dunka would harm me and the company even if you beat me to death." Dainanzhou was silent for a moment, but he still firmly shook his head. "If that's the case, I'll show you the evidence," I said. "Do you know about the soul-searching seal?" Dainanzhou wasn't a cultivator, but he was a feng shui enthusiast. When he was in university, he served as the vice president of the Metaphysics Society, so he had heard about many of these spells and the like. "I know. It's a method to forcibly search the memory from the soul," Dainanzhou said. "And I've heard people say that the memory of the soul can only be erased, but it can't be changed. So, Zhou-yi, as long as you can show me that the kid was indeed buried by Wu Dunka on the construction site, I will believe you." Dainanzhou's tone was a little shaky at the end. I could feel that even now, he still couldn't accept the fact that Wu Dunka was the murderer who harmed him. I used the Taoist energy in my body and touched Dainanzhou's forehead. An undetectable, pale, golden air instantly drilled into Dai Nanzhou's head. To put it bluntly, the soul-searching seal was to search the memory of the soul from the spirit. This thing was no longer useful to me, so I just put the kid's memory into Dai Nanzhou's head. Dai Nanzhou was very surprised by the use of this spell, but soon his face changed from surprise to shock, and then to disbelief and sadness. Just as Dai Nanzhou had said, no one could fake the memory of the spirit. Now, the fact was in front of us. It was Wu Dunke who had invited the kid. Dai Nanzhou's face was full of shock. He sat in a daze for a few minutes before he said with a trace of sadness, "How could it be him? During this period of time, he has been helping me deal with the company's affairs. Without his contribution, this building would never have been completed. Why would he do this?" I patted Dai Nanzhou's shoulder. The feeling of being betrayed by a brother was very uncomfortable. "Nanzhou, think about it. Everything will pass. It's hard to draw a tiger's skin, but it's hard to draw its bones. Let's go and find Wu Dunke." According to all the clues, Wu Dunke was just an ordinary man. Perhaps there was something else behind this kid. If we didn't investigate it thoroughly, we would have to face endless troubles. Dai Nanzhou was shocked. His body slumped on the chair like a pile of mud. It took him a long time to pull himself together. However, his face was still pained. I've always treated him well. Why would he do this to me? Why would he treat the company that way? After I consoled him for a long time, Dai Nanzhou's emotions gradually calmed down. After all these years of experience, Dai Nanzhou already had the bearing of a great general. However, it was probably because this matter had dealt a huge blow to him that he was still dispirited even when he was about to leave. The two of us went to Wu Dunke's room and knocked on the door. Wu Dunke seemed to be talking to someone on the phone. When he saw us, his pupils shrank. Then, he smiled and greeted us warmly. "It's late. What's up? Do you need something from me? Come in and sit." We entered the room. Dai Nanzhou wore a quiet face. However, when Wu Dunke handed us a cup of tea, he suddenly burst out. "Why? I've always treated you well. Why would you want to harm me?" Wu Dunke panicked for a moment. However, he immediately reacted and smiled awkwardly. "Nanzhou, what's wrong? Are you sick?" Dai Nanzhou pushed away Wu Dunke's hand that was about to cover his head. "Tell me, this isn't true, right? You didn't put that glass bottle on the construction site, right?" "Nanzhou, what are you talking about? Why would I raise a little ghost on the construction site?" Wu Dunke smiled. I sneered in my heart. This Wu Dunke was really experienced. Even now, he was still playing dumb. I asked, "How did you know that the small bottle contained a little ghost?" Didn't you say that? I don't know about these things. It's all hearsay." Wu Dunke dodged my gaze. The reason why Dai Nanzhou wasn't doing well recently was because of the construction site. Looking at his dark red fate palace, there were other reasons for his bad luck. Otherwise, why would Dai Nanzhou be taken away by the police and say that he violated the law when he signed the contract? I sneered. "You still won't admit it?" "Admit? Admit what?" Wu Dunke wasn't as nervous as before. He probably knew that I was tricking him. His expression returned to his usual shrewd and capable look. "I didn't do anything. What do I admit?" "Zhou-yi, I know it's not easy for you to earn money, but if you use this method, it's a bit despicable." The meaning of Wu Dunke's words was obvious. He said that I slandered him in order to complete the task and compared me to a swindler. If it was a normal day, Dai Nanzhou would go crazy after hearing this and would immediately jump out to defend me. However, he was in pain right now. He rubbed his head. Perhaps emotionally, he still couldn't accept the fact that Wu Dunke was the murderer. I smiled. "Do you really want me to take out the evidence?" I looked at Dai Nanzhou with pity. It wasn't that I didn't want to expose Wu Dunke, but I felt that if that happened, Dai Nanzhou's heart would hurt even more. I think you're making something out of nothing." Wu Dunke looked like a wronged little wife. "I think you're using me as a scapegoat because you can't find the murderer. However, I'm telling you, Wu Dunke, am not easy to bully. All right, since you want me to tear off all pretense of cordiality, then I have nothing to say," I said helplessly. Originally, I planned to persuade Dai Nanzhou to find a reason to send Wu Dunke back to Shenzhen if he admitted it. After all, we were working together, so there was no need to make us enemies. However, from the looks of it, I was too naive. Some people wouldn't cry until they saw the coffin. The evidence is under your pillow. Wu Dunka, do you dare to lift your pillow and show us? I pointed at Wu Dunka's pillow and said word by word. Dai Nanzhou opened his eyes wide and looked at me in shock. Perhaps he didn't believe that I had other evidence to prove that Wu Dunka was the murderer. Although little Gui's memory was real and no one could fabricate it, it could only exist in a person's mind after all. It couldn't be presented as irrefutable evidence. I patted Dai Nanzhou's shoulder and signaled him to calm down. If little Gui's memory was a blow to Dai Nanzhou's head, then the evidence under the pillow was a knife that pierced Dai Nanzhou's heart. Wu Dunka suddenly slumped there. He didn't have the imposing manner he had just now. After being stunned for a long time, his eyes slowly regained their vigor. He looked at me with resentment. Zhou Li, when did you start suspecting me? Dai Nanzhou's heart skipped a beat. Wu Dunka had already admitted what he had done. This was a huge blow to Dai Nanzhou. I searched the soul of little Gui at the construction site and found out that you were the one who buried little Gui. And when I walked into the room, I faintly felt the aura of witchcraft, I said. As the old saying goes, God is watching what people do. If you don't want people to know, then don't do it. Wu Dunka smiled miserably. I spent a lot of money to invite an expert to do this, but I didn't expect you to see through it in the end. Chapter 462. There was a yellow talisman under Wu Dunka's pillow. He had used a red brush to draw a talisman on it. The strange aura in the room was coming from this talisman. Wu Dunka held the yellow talisman with a distressed face. This is the gift I got when I bought the ghost. I purposely hid it under my pillow. I didn't expect that you would find it. As soon as he took out the yellow talisman, the strange aura in the room became thicker. I used my spiritual sense to scan the talisman and found that its aura was strange. It wasn't Yin energy, but Taoist energy. Moreover, it seemed to have some kind of restriction. It made sense. According to Wu Dunka, if this yellow talisman was a gift when I bought the ghost, it meant that it was a talisman that could dispel Yin energy. The small bottle I had dug out from the construction site had thick Yin energy. It was enough to kill an adult man easily. However, Wu Dunka, who didn't understand Taoist magic, was able to bury it in the construction site without getting hurt. He must have received the protection of this yellow talisman. I received the yellow talisman and quietly used my Yin energy to nourish it. I found that it could absorb Yin energy very well. This is a Yin expelling talisman. I believe it's the reason you were able to hold the small bottle safely, I said. The Yin expelling talisman could dispel Yin energy and prevent it from harming people. Many sects in the world of martial arts had studied this. With my current realm, I could see at a glance. Wu Dunka said, "You have good eyes." Many geomancy masters couldn't see through it. I didn't expect that a young man like you could see through it at first glance. You're right. This is the Yin expelling talisman that the man gave me when I bought the ghost. I didn't answer Wu Dunka's question. Dai Nanzhou wore a painful face. Dunka, did you really bring that ghost here? Tell me, why did you do that? The truth was right in front of us, and Dai Nanzhou had to believe it. It was hard to be betrayed by someone close to him. Dai Nanzhou clutched his head and shook his head. I treated you well. Why did you harm me? Why did you do that? Wu Dunka sneered. Treated me well? If it weren't for you, I would be the business manager of my company in Hong Kong. I could take charge of everything by myself. Now that you're here, I can only do odd jobs for you. I don't even have to do any hard labor. You still have the cheek to say that you treat me well? Dunka, I've always trusted you. How can you say that? Dai Nanzhou said. Trust? Humph, what a joke. Wu Dunka said, I've worked in the company for 18 years. Did you think it was easy for me to go from salesman to where I am now? It wasn't easy for me to get this opportunity to expand my business in Hong Kong. But when I was almost done with the paperwork, my boss sent you to Hong Kong. You're just a young lad. You've only been in the company for 3 years. What right do you have to steal my fruits of victory? Just because you are the boss's nephew? Wu Dunka, who was originally quiet, had completely lost control of his emotions. In the past, when I was running business, I would carry gifts and wait for those officials to come out. The weather was 40 degrees Celsius, and I would wait the whole day. Where were you at that time? In order to sign the bill smoothly, I drank with a client and my stomach bled. I was hospitalized for more than a week and almost lost my life. Where were you at that time? Woodenka's chatterbox could not be held back. He spat out all the grievances he had suffered before. I've done so much for the company. As long as this business is completed, I can get the boss's favor. I can earn a lot of money. I can buy a villa in the rich district of Shenzhen, drive a sports car, and play like a celebrity. But because I came, I lost all these things that were originally within my reach. I've done so much before, and now it's all your credit. Why? Why should I give up all my credit the moment you come? Dainanzhou, I King hate you. With every word he said, Dainanzhou's face darkened. When he finished, Dainanzhou raised his head and looked at him. There was no longer the pain in his voice. He only said gloomily, I will remember all the things you've done, all the contributions you've made. The company will also remember. When this building is completed, you will definitely get what you deserve. Do you really have to do this? Do you have to destroy this business that you've worked so hard to complete? If you destroy everything, where will you put me? How will I go back and face my uncle? You're forcing me to my death. Death? Woodenka's face twisted. It's too easy for you to die, just like that. I'll make you lose all your reputation. I've put in all my effort for this project. Just as all the procedures were about to be completed and the building was about to start, you jumped out like a flea. All my efforts were in vain. My dream of villa was ruined. Dainanzhou, I hate you. I'll make you lose all your reputation. I'll make you feel ashamed in the company. Dainanzhou pointed at Woodenka. You. Woodenka suddenly laughed bitterly after his hysteria. What a pity that someone came out of nowhere. Otherwise, you really wouldn't be able to make a comeback for the rest of your life. Woodenka's expression made me angry and feel pity. I said helplessly, what can you get other than making the company suffer a huge loss? I can get everything I want. Woodenka said, Zhou-yi, if it weren't for your appearance, Dainanzhou would have lost all his reputation. He might have been called back by the headquarters. By then, wouldn't the construction site be handed over to me? Then, wouldn't I be able to fulfill my dream? It's been 18 years. I've always dreamed of being able to take charge, drive a luxury car, and live in a villa, but it's all because of you. Zhou-yi, I hate you. I hate you more than I hate Dainanzhou. Dainanzhou was silent for a long time. The expression on his face became more and more painful. He continued, Dunka, why do you have to do this? Originally, the company's business was going to be handed over to you. My uncle asked me to come to Hong Kong because he saw that the conditions were right and asked me to come here to gain experience. In the future, I'll be able to take on a big responsibility. After the gold plating is done, I'll still have to go back. At that time, won't the Hong Kong business still be handed over to you? Why are you so radical? You don't have to lie to me. Woodenka said, the boss won't be so kind, and you won't either. You're all snakes and rats in the same nest. You only want to squeeze the fruits of my labor and live on my achievements. You won't be so kind at all. I've been in the company for 18 years. When has the company not treated me like this? Dainanzhou, I hate that I can't ruin your reputation immediately. You don't have to lie to me anymore. Do you know why my uncle has been treating you like this for so many years? Dainanzhou said, my uncle has seen that you're eager for success. He wants you to gain experience and wear down your evil aura. Nonsense. He's just passing on his son, not his ability. Woodenka rolled his eyes. I'm so capable, but Wang Yongjun has never looked at me in the eye. He even sent you to steal the fruits of my victory. You two are snakes and rats in the same nest, jackals of the same lair. I shook my head. Woodenka was crazy. From him, I could vaguely see the stubbornness that the Miao woman, Zhao Ying, had when I first came to Shenzhen. Even if the company isn't fair, it's too extreme to use this method. You don't understand Taoism. That otherworldly item has a lot of Yin energy. Although you have the Yin expelling talisman to protect you, you can't avoid getting hurt. I didn't know when Woodenka's mouth started to bleed. People live with their last breath. As long as you can defeat Dainan Zhou and win this project, what's the big deal if you die? As long as I can drive a luxurious car and live in a mansion, I won't frown even if I die right now. The executives of the other companies can have beautiful women and nice cars with them. Why do I have to drive the broken car that the company gave me every day? I've thought about it. I'll use half of my life savings to set up this trap. Then, I'll use the company's bonus to buy a villa, a sports car, and a female celebrity. After I fulfill my dreams, I'll die. When I was born, my family didn't even have steam buns to eat. I want to die with beautiful women, nice cars, and a luxurious villa. Ha! I said begrudgingly, is it worth it? Worth it. I've contributed to the company for 18 years, and I've given all the credit to Dainan Zhou. Do you think it's worth it for me to take a month's salary? In this world, the winner takes all. It's only worth it if you can fulfill your dreams and call the wind and summon the rain. My dream is simple. I want to be independent and have beautiful women and nice cars. As long as I can fulfill my dream, what's the big deal about dying? Said Wu Dunka. Dunka, wake up. Don't be so stubborn. Let's not talk about this anymore. Just tell me like before. After this project is over, I'll ask my uncle to give you a villa. What do you think? Dainan Zhou's voice sounded like he was begging. When we were in school, he was a kind person. That was how we became friends. And now, he hadn't changed his mind. Wu Dunka had treated him badly, but he still wanted to save him. Don't be a hypocrite. Wu Dunka didn't buy it. He roared crazily. And it's too late. Remember that I was hospitalized a few days ago? Because I've been in contact with that ghost too much, my body can't take it anymore. The doctor said that I've been poisoned by a very powerful poison. I can't be saved. Dainan Zhou was a kind person. He was surprised when he heard what he said. Really? The blood at the corner of Wu Dunka's mouth hadn't dried yet, and his face looked terrible. Of course it's true. Are you happy to hear this news? I wanted to hold on for a few more days and see you lose your reputation before I die. But now, it seems that I can't do it. Wu Dunka spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood was dark and smelled strange. Wu Dunka's face didn't look normal. His glabella was dark red, and the veins on his temples were bulging. Zhou Yi, you're very skilled, right? Please save him. Although he did something wrong, he doesn't deserve to die. Wu Dunka looked like he was seriously poisoned. Dainan Zhou gathered around and grabbed my arm, begging for mercy for him. At this moment, I furrowed my brows and felt disgusted. I consider myself a kind-hearted person, but I was different from Dainan Zhou. After experiencing so many things in the past few years, I had long since understood that there was a bottom line for kindness. This Wu Dunka had already gone crazy, and there was no cure for him. Why was it necessary to save such a person? Chapter 463. The first time I saw Wu Dunka, I found that his life palace was dark red. It seemed that he hadn't been doing well recently. At that time, I thought that it was because of the trouble at the construction site. But now, it seemed that I was wrong. Wu Dunka's glabella was dark red, not because his luck was blocked, but because of the Yin energy in the small bottle. Moreover, he was using his blood to activate the secret technique. The most abundant Yang energy was at the tip of the tongue. When he activated the secret technique, the blood from the tip of the tongue would instantly double the attack power. Wu Dunka didn't know any techniques, so this shouldn't have happened to him. However, at this moment, he suddenly grabbed the yellow talisman that he had just given me. He held the yellow talisman tightly and spat out another mouthful of black blood. Although I don't know any Taoist techniques, I'm not willing to wait for death. When Elder sold this kid to me, he told me that this yellow talisman could recognize its master with blood and help him launch the last attack. Zhou Yi, you ruined my plan. I will make you pay the price. Wu Dunka said as he continuously spat out blood. As he opened and closed his mouth, I could faintly see that he had bitten the tip of his own tongue. It was clear how much he hated me at this moment. After the Yin dispelling talisman was activated by his blood, it instantly turned into a gray gas that wrapped around Wu Dunka's blood. Then, it flew toward me like a black arrow. What a vicious move. I thought to myself. However, when I looked at this dispelling talisman, why didn't I notice that it had such an effect? What kind of sect would have such a sinister technique? Who is the elder when he mentioned? I casually waved my hand, and the Tao energy in my body surged out, wrapping around the black arrows that were flying toward me. The black arrows were quickly melted by my Tao energy, turning into drops of black water. The black water dripped on the floor and burned a few holes on the undamaged carpet. I had used my spiritual sense to scan it. The yellow talisman was just an ordinary dispelling talisman. However, after the dispelling talisman got its master's blood, the remaining energy could condense into a ghost life talisman. Who did you buy this from? Also, who is that elder one? This person had sold such a vicious thing to Wu Dunka. He didn't have good intentions. Moreover, none of the local feng shui masters in Hong Kong dared to accept this thing. This showed that this person's cultivation base wasn't ordinary, or his background wasn't ordinary. If he didn't get to the bottom of this, there would be trouble in the future. I said seriously, "Tell me, who sold you such a sinister thing? Tell me, and I might save your life." "Yes, Dunka, who did you buy this from?" Dai Nanzhou hurriedly went over to support Wu Dunka and asked anxiously, "Save?" Wu Dunka coughed up blood as he weakly smiled. "It's too late. When that person sold this to me, he said that once the ghost life talisman is activated, the person holding it will die immediately. Zhou, I can't wait to kill you before I die. I can only blame myself for not knowing the Taoist method, and I can't blame anyone else. Dunka, why do you have to do this?" Dai Nanzhou cried. Seeing that his close friend had become like this, Dai Nanzhou's original anger was completely cast aside, and his words were filled with pain. "I want to kill you. However, this Zhou, you ruined my plans. After thinking about it, killing him would be more satisfying, but I don't know any spells, so I can't kill Zhou. The fortune teller said that my life was short, and that I would eventually die in a foreign land. I didn't expect it to come true." Wu Dinka's body was currently very weak. His skin was aging at a speed visible to the naked eye. This should be the side effect of the ghost life talisman. Wu Dunka, you can't walk into a dead end. You have to be more open-minded about everything. I hope that you can think about this clearly when you reincarnate. You and Dai Nanzhou are friends. After you die, I will help you refine your soul so that you can smoothly enter reincarnation. Okay, now tell me, who gave you this thing? I shook my head. This Wu Dunka was still stubborn, and there was no way to save him. But after all, he was someone that Dai Nanzhou valued. I helped him refine his soul, not for him, but for Dai Nanzhou. Wu Dunka's voice became weaker, but he still coughed and said, "You can't help me. After I die, my soul will be summoned back by that person to be refined into a little ghost. When that person sold me the small bottle, he took 2 of my hairs and said that I had some 7 evils fate and that my fate was suitable for refining ghosts. He asked me to think carefully before making this deal. At that time, I thought that I could hold my head high while I was alive. As for what would happen after I died, I didn't care. So, I knew that I couldn't reincarnate after I died, so I bought that little ghost. Moreover, that person's cultivation is extremely high, and his attainments in feng shui are very deep. I'm afraid that you won't be able to pass through his hands. So, Zhou, you don't have to say these words to disgust me." After saying these words, Wu Dinka's body slowly shrank, and his skin became like the bark of a dead tree. His whole body was slowly shrinking. Dunka, Dai Nanzhou saw the strangeness around him and shook Wu Dunka a few times, but there was no reaction. Wu Dunka was obviously dead. He had bad intentions, and he only had himself to blame. He deserved to end up like this. Before Dai Nanzhou's mournful voice faded away, there was something strange above Wu Dunka's head. Immediately, a gray airflow floated out from the top of his head. I pulled Dai Nanzhou away from Wu Dunka. To prevent him from getting hurt, I used my Tao energy to wrap him up. After doing this, I quietly observed the situation of Wu Dunka. The airflow above Wu Dunka's head was gray, and it floated out from his body, gathering more and more. Gradually, The airflow formed the shape of a person above his head. It was vaguely Wu Dunka's appearance. The gray airflow wasn't very solid, but it had its own shape. It was Wu Dunka's soul, which had been poisoned by the ghost life talisman. After a person died, if no one summoned them, their soul wouldn't immediately float out. Instead, it would exist in the corpse for a period of time. However, Wu Dunka's soul wasn't like that. It seemed it was just as he had said. After his death, his soul would automatically float to the person who had sold him the ghost. I was a little happy. Although I couldn't get that person's name from Wu Dunka, with this clue, it wouldn't be difficult to find that person. I urged my Tao energy and left a trace of my spirit sense in Wu Dunka's soul. At this moment, I was already a quasi-heavenly master. Within 1,000 miles, I could easily sense the location of my spirit sense. It was the same principle as how Liang Tianxin could accurately find me by following the traces of the ghost seal. After doing all this, I didn't alert the enemy. I quietly watched Wu Dunka's soul go through the wall, drifting toward the place where the so-called Elder One was in the distance. The speed of a soul that had just left the body wasn't fast. I believed that it wouldn't be able to reach Elder One in a short time. If I followed it, it would arouse the suspicion of others. Anyway, Wu Dunka's soul had a trace of my spirit sense, so he wouldn't be able to escape. After everything was done, Dainan Zhou and I took care of Wu Dunka's body. Then, I returned to my room and carefully recalled what had happened. To get promoted, Wu Dunka didn't hesitate to buy this ghost. The person who had sold him the ghost had another purpose. He wanted Wu Dunka's 7 fiend soul. Moreover, the person who had sold him the ghost should be an expert in refining ghosts. I believed that his cultivation base and identity weren't low. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many geomancy masters here. However, there was still something I didn't understand. Until now, I still hadn't figured out who had sold the ghost to Wu Dunka. How could these geomancy masters see through it at first glance? I had asked Dainan Zhou about the geomancy masters we had hired. They had also gone to the pit to check. I believed that they had sensed the existence of the small bottle and the ghost. However, none of them had dug the bottle up. There must be something hidden. I believed that these geomancy masters knew who had raised the ghost. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done that. I used my technique to check. Wu Dunka's soul was still drifting. It was clear that he hadn't reached Elder One yet. Since I had nothing to do, I put on some clothes and went to the construction site. The obstacle that had blocked the energy flow in the construction site had been removed. From a distance, I could feel a wisp of dragon energy rising. It had restored the aura of a good geomancy site. I slowly walked to the construction site and closed my eyes to sense. I found that the dragon energy in this place was very pure. It was clear that the evil energy had disappeared. I believed that the construction site would start again tomorrow. However, right at this moment, the old gatekeeper called me. Young man. The old man in the makeshift house was reading the newspaper with the light on. As soon as he saw me, he waved at me. If you have time, why don't you come in and have a drink? This old man has wine and stories here. I smiled. All right, I'll accept your invitation. Then, I entered the old man's makeshift house and sat facing the old gatekeeper. Young man, I see that you're frowning. I believe you have something on your mind. This old man is a few years older than you, and I've seen more things than you. If you tell me, perhaps I can give you an answer. The old gatekeeper smiled. This old man had a kind face and seemed to be a good talker. Moreover, I sensed carefully and found a wisp of Tao energy in his body. It seemed he was a kindred spirit. I smiled and asked, Grandpa, do you also know how to cast spells? Haha, I'm ashamed. The old man took a sip of wine. When I was young, I used to learn from an old master. I wanted to be a geomancy master, but I didn't expect that I would be so stupid. Even though I'm half buried, I still haven't felt the existence of qi. That's why I'm a cripple. Later on, I quit and became an old gatekeeper. I can't be compared to you, young man. You have a profound cultivation base at such a young age. In the future, you will have great achievements. I smiled. I'm just showing off in front of an expert. Young man, you're too modest. Although I don't know much about cultivation, and I can't see your cultivation base, I know a little about geomancy. You've only been here for one day, and the geomancy here has changed. I believe you must have helped solve the big problem, and your cultivation base must be extraordinary. However, have you ever thought about why so many geomancy masters have come here before? Why did they all shake their heads and say that they couldn't solve it? The old gatekeeper said with a smile as he served me food. The old man's words were exactly what I was thinking. I put down my chopsticks and said seriously, "This is what I'm confused about. Please enlighten me, old mister." This old man is just an old gatekeeper. I don't dare to call myself mister. Young man, you're giving me too much credit. Although the old gatekeeper said so, he stroked his beard with his hand. It was obvious that he enjoyed being called an old mister. Chapter 464. Hong Kong's feng shui is very strong, and there are many sects here. Moreover, a few years ago, many sects couldn't survive in the mainland, so they came to Hong Kong. They didn't expect to see flowers blooming within the walls. Many sects didn't do well in the mainland, but when they came to Hong Kong, they became very popular. Many of them practiced evil techniques, such as controlling corpses and raising ghosts. The old gatekeeper spoke with fervor and assurance. After that, he took a sip of his wine and continued, "These sects are not large in scale, but because of their strange cultivation methods and ruthless methods, although they are not very influential, everyone's expression changes when they speak of them and they stay away from them." I lowered my head and pondered for a while. The old man wasn't lying. The sects in Jianghu practiced Tao Qi or witchcraft Qi. The process was very difficult, and it couldn't be done in one step. However, it was different for those evil sections. For example, the corpse-chasing sect. As long as they had their secret method, a cultivator who had just entered the sect could control a powerful zombie at will. It was no different from a fool's dream for a cultivator of the same level to kill him. It's because of this reason that the feng shui masters in Hong Kong don't dare to provoke those evil sects. The old man said worriedly, "Young man, do you really think that the reason why so many feng shui masters couldn't deal with this ghost was because their cultivation base wasn't high enough?" The old man said, "You're wrong. Not to mention them. Even I know that there's something strange going on here. Don't they know that someone has buried something evil in this house? It's just because they don't want to provoke it. It's not like what they said, that their cultivation base isn't high enough to deal with this ghost. I've been a security guard for dozens of years, and I've seen this kind of thing many times. As long as it's related to ghosts, these feng shui masters will choose to retreat, regardless of whether they can deal with the ghost or not. To reach their level of cultivation base, they need at least dozens of years. Why would they offend those evil sects just because of a business deal? Most of those evil sects don't have good intentions, and their methods are unscrupulous. Young man, I can see that you're an honest man, and you're from the mainland. Don't let this matter get you into trouble." The old guard couldn't help but try to persuade him. To be honest, with my current cultivation, I'm not afraid of people coming to find trouble with me. However, it's still the same old saying, the older one is in Jianghu, the more timid one becomes. He had worked so hard for so long to get to where he was today. If he really lost his life because of a moment of carelessness, it would not be worth it. I cupped my hands at the old man. "Thank you for your guidance." "Do you know who raised this ghost?" I searched with my spiritual sense and found that Woot Dunka's ghost was still wandering around. I believed that he hadn't reached his destination yet. If the old man knew who he was, I would be able to prepare for a rainy day. I've lived my entire life, but I've yet to feel Qi. How could I see through the origin of that ghost with just a glance? The old man was a little overwhelmed by the favor. He stroked his beard and said with a smile, but then he changed his tone and said, "But according to this little old man's guess, there are no more than 3 reasons for the ghost's origin." "Oh, which 3? I was surprised. There are many evil sects in Hong Kong, but when it comes to raising ghosts, there are 3 famous sections. One is the Chasing Corpse sect, the other is the Nanyang Kumanthong, and the last is the Ghost Raising sect." The old man said with a smile. I carefully recalled the situation in the pit during the day. If there was a small bottle in the pit that raised a ghost, then it must be different from the Chasing Corpse sect, which drove zombies to fight. Thong mostly raised children who died before they reached adulthood. So, this ghost was most likely from the ghost-raising sect. I was shocked. Ghost-raising sect? Isn't it the sect that chased me for 1,000 miles? Liang Tianxin? Could it be that the person who sold Wu Dunka the ghost was the great elder of the ghost-raising sect, Liang Tianxin? If it really was him, then enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. I was stunned and didn't say anything. The old man seemed to have misunderstood me and tried to comfort me. Kid, don't be afraid. Your cultivation base isn't low. Even if those people come to find you, they might not be your match. However, young people are too hot-blooded. You should be more cautious in the future. It's not worth it if you lose your life to help others. I've learned something. I stood up and bowed to the old man. Yeah, the old man stroked his beard and smiled. Good kid, you're still young. You still have a long way to go. It's getting late. Go back and rest. You need to conserve your energy. I replied with a smile and turned around to leave. Since this old man had given me a clue, I would follow it to find a melon. No matter who the person behind this was, I would catch him one day. However, just as I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered something. I stopped and said to the old man, Grandpa, heaven and earth are chaotic and divided into yin and yang energies. If you could sense the evil spirit in the pit, I believe you could vaguely sense the existence of yin energy. Do you know why you couldn't sense the existence of qi? The old man in front of me was kind. I had heard him say that he was half-buried, but he still couldn't sense qi. It was fate that brought us together, so there was no harm in giving me some advice. Perhaps the old man situation reminded me of the time when I was studying in university. At that time, I had also reached the same bottleneck. Fortunately, I was able to break through quickly. However, the old man in front of me didn't have anyone to guide him, so he was stuck in this realm for the rest of his life. He couldn't become a geomaster. Cultivation depends on fate. This old man was able to meet me today, so it can be considered as a fate for him. Why? Kid, tell me quickly, how can I sense qi? The old man's expression changed when he heard that I wanted to give him some advice. Perhaps this was the real reason why the old man wanted to see me. However, he knew that many cultivators in the martial world didn't want to talk about their cultivation methods to outsiders. That was why he didn't ask. Heaven and earth use primordial chaos as qi, and my body uses the darkness as qi. Qi is invisible. It's not meant to be sensed. It's meant to be used. As long as you can sense the yin and yang energies and use them, you will be able to control qi. Then I casually walked away. Shortly after, I heard the old man pat his head and sigh. He seemed to have understood something. On the path of cultivation, everyone had their own fate. I didn't turn my head. I just smiled and left. When I returned to the hotel, I carefully recalled what had happened today. According to the old man, it was possible that the person who sold the ghost to Wu Dunka was a member of the ghost-raising sect. As I thought that I could finally see Liang Tianxin again, I cheered up. The last time I saw Liang Tianxin, he had chased me for thousands of miles, all the way to the Yellow Spring River. Eventually, I had to rely on Xiao Jin's help to escape. However, he still made an appointment with me in 2 years. He said that he would take me to a place after 2 years. However, 2 years had passed. Why didn't Liang Tianxin come to see me? Did he forget that I was the murderer who killed his precious son? Or was he delayed by something else? Instinctively, I looked at my arm. Before Liang Kaixiong died, he had left a ghost seal on my arm. Now, when I looked at my arm, the ghost seal was gone. The ghost seal itself contains a huge amount of energy that can be absorbed by the person who has been sealed. I believe that it has been digested by me as my cultivation continues to improve. No wonder that Liang Tianxin hasn't come looking for me for so long. I can't blame Liang Tianxin for not being thoughtful back then. It's just that my cultivation has increased too quickly. Back then, Liang Tianxin would never have imagined that I could actually cultivate to the quasi-celestial master level in just 2 years. I used my spiritual sense to check. Wu Dunka's soul was still drifting. It seemed he hadn't reached his destination yet. I didn't mind him and went to bed. It was a quiet night. When I woke up the next morning, Dai Nanzhou came to see me. I want to start work again. Are you in danger? The project in Hong Kong was very important, and the headquarters had been urging us. Moreover, we hadn't wasted a single day, and we had wasted an astronomical amount of money. I nodded and told him, it's not a big deal. We can start work again. Moreover, I'm here these days. If something happens, I can solve it immediately. Don't worry. Zhou exhaled in relief. However, he still didn't smile. It seemed Wu Dunke's case had affected him a lot. The kind, smiling boy had become much more mature now. After thanking me one more time, he left. I guessed he was going to arrange the progress of the project. Of course, I didn't pay much attention to these things. After washing my face and rinsing my mouth, I quietly used the secret technique to sense the wisp of spiritual sense in Wu Dunke's soul. After a night of drifting, Wu Dunke's soul had settled down. I believed he had reached his destination. I calmed my mind and sensed. His soul was in a place in Jiulong. I didn't bother Zhou. I directly went out and hailed a taxi. I followed the direction the spiritual sense had come from and asked the driver to go to Jiulong. The road conditions in Hong Kong weren't bad. Although it was rush hour, we didn't encounter any traffic jams. I chatted with the driver on the way. Around an hour later, we arrived in front of a high-class villa area in Jiulong. The spiritual sense had come from this area. This area was built on a mountain. Aside from the villas, there were many lush shrubs. It was a beautiful sight that made people feel relaxed and happy. As we didn't want to alert the enemy, I called for a taxi to stop by a wall in this area. I used the Tao energy to block the surveillance cameras. Seizing the opportunity when no one was around, I jumped and entered the area. I walked along the stone steps of the area for around 10 minutes before I reached a villa. This place had the thickest spiritual sense. Wu Dunke's soul was in this villa. The villa in front of me had 5 floors. At this moment, Wu Dunke's soul was on the 3rd floor, where the curtains were closed. With my skills, it wasn't hard to sneak in. After entering the villa, I found no one in the living room on the 1st floor. I glanced around and went upstairs. When I reached a room on the 3rd floor, I stopped. I used my spiritual sense to sense. Besides Wu Dunke's soul, there was only one other person in the room. From the Tao energy this person emitted, he should have a 4-star glorious knowledge cultivation base. A 4-star glorious knowledge cultivator couldn't be Liang Tianxin. However, I sensed an aura similar to Liang Tianxin's. This person was most likely related to the ghost-raising sect. With my current cultivation base, dealing with a 4-star glorious knowledge earth master wasn't a problem. I concealed my aura and knocked on the door in front of me. Who is it? Chapter 465. The man in the room asked, but I didn't answer. I just raised my hand and knocked on the door one more time. Who is it? The man's voice became more cautious. Before I could answer, I felt a cold aura shoot toward me from the other side of the door. This aura wasn't strong. With my current cultivation base, I could deal with it easily. I stood still, and a witchcraft energy barrier automatically appeared in front of my chest. After this barrier was formed, an ear-piercing and short sound abruptly sounded out. Subsequently, an extremely tiny black shadow drilled a small hole through the solid wooden door and pierced straight through it. It pierced straight into the shaman energy barrier, and only then did it stop moving and was enveloped in midair. I focused and saw that the small shadow was a black steel needle. The tip of the needle was sharp, just like an ordinary steel needle. The thick part at the back was carved with all kinds of hollow inscriptions. A thick wisp of energy twirled around it. It didn't look ordinary at all. When it came to controlling a magic tool, the smaller it was, the harder it was to control it. From this steel needle, I could tell that the man in the room had an extraordinary cultivation base. However, I sensed that the energy on the steel needle was at the middle stage of the glorious era. It wasn't a threat to me. I retrieved the witchcraft energy barrier and let the steel needle fall to the ground. Then, I reached my hand out and touched the door in front of me. The high-quality wooden door turned into powder in just a blink of an eye. The other party had proactively attacked me, so it was useless to hide my aura. I directly walked into the room. After entering the room, I glanced around and saw a middle-aged man in his 40s standing by the table in front of me. He had a long, thin face and triangular eyes. He had a dark aura around him. He looked at me cautiously, his eyes solemn. "Who are you? Why did you trespass my house?" The man spoke fluent Cantonese and asked me in a gloomy voice. Cantonese was quite different from Mandarin, but after all, I had stayed in Shenzhen for a period of time. Under the influence of what I saw and heard, I could still understand this sentence. Of course, I wouldn't answer his boring question. I waved my hand, and my Tao energy covered the entire room. After confirming that the man couldn't use Tao techniques to communicate with the outside world, I asked him faintly, "Are you the one who sold the ghost to Wu Dunka?" "Wu Dunka?" The man was startled. He immediately switched to Mandarin with a thick accent and answered, "That's right. Wu Dunka did hire one for my place. I can see that your cultivation is not bad, so you must be someone from the mainland's metaphysics world. I'm not sure about the situation in your mainland, but in Hong Kong, hiring and selling ghosts is a business transaction. There's no reason to pick a fight after the fact. If you break into the house because of Wu Dunka, you will break the rules of our Hong Kong Feng Shui circle." Rules? You just need to answer my question. With your cultivation, you're not qualified to talk to me about rules. I didn't even look at him. I didn't understand the rules of Hong Kong Feng Shui, but I didn't ask why, nor did I care about the consequences. It wasn't a reasonable thing to buy and sell little ghosts to harm people. I had a balance in my heart. After hearing what I said, this person's expression changed again. Anger surged out of his face, and he shouted, "You mainland brat, you really have some big words. This is Hong Kong, and I'm an elder of the ghost-raising sect. If you want me to answer your question, you have to let me know your strength first." While talking, this person took out an incense burner magic tool. After chanting a mysterious incantation, a ghost wearing a black cloak appeared in front of me. Since this person was from the ghost-raising sect, his spell was related to the summoning of ghosts. After he finished casting the spell, the evil ghost in the black cloak crazily stormed toward me with a cold wind. I couldn't help but shake my head and chuckle. Although I didn't hide my aura anymore, his cultivation base was too low, so he couldn't sense my realm. That was why he dared to attack me. Ignorance is bliss. If he could sense my aura, he would have been well-behaved long ago. Since you're an elder of the ghost-raising sect, you should know where Liang Tianxin is right now, right? The ghost in front of me was at most a ghost king. I only needed to use 30% of my strength to deal with it. I wasn't in a hurry and asked him, "How dare you? You dare to call the Grand Elder by his name?" The anger in the skinny man's eyes intensified. After chanting a complicated incantation, a sword-like magic tool appeared in the ghostly figure's hand. Its might increased by a bit, and in the blink of an eye, it pounced in front of me. I smiled faintly and waved my hand. The space around the ghost in front of me twisted and changed shape. Shortly after, the ghost in front of me was suppressed by my seal spell, vanishing without a trace. The entire process had taken only a few seconds. Seeing that I had easily dealt with his ghost, the middle-aged man was dumbstruck. His mouth was wide open, and his face was full of disbelief. "You," I clapped my hands and asked indifferently, "How is it? Can you answer my question now?" I guessed that the magic tool that the ghost had just used was the middle-aged man's life-saving measure. However, he couldn't even struggle for a few seconds. He was clearly frightened. His face was dejected, and he didn't look angry anymore. Instead, he put on a flattering expression and said, "Fellow Taoist, please spare my life." I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. That's why I spoke so arrogantly. "Fellow Taoist. No, senior, you're a great man of great stature. Please forgive me." "What do you want to know?" "I'll tell you everything I know." I couldn't help but laugh. This person was smart enough to change his facial expression easily. Of course, I didn't care about his character. I just asked, "Tell me your identity. Also, why did you sell the ghost to Wu Dunka?" Yes. The man nodded and continued, "I'm Wen Shiliang, an elder of the ghost-raising sect. I'm friends with Wu Dunka. A few days ago, he came to me with money and asked me to set up a trap to stop the construction of the building. I was blinded by greed, so, blinded by greed?" Hearing this, I sneered. This man had sure Yao cultivation base. In the secular world, he could be considered a master. Moreover, he held a high position in the ghost-raising sect. He definitely didn't lack money. Moreover, Wu Dunka was just a small leader of the Wang group in Hong Kong. How much money could he have that elder one would want? I interrupted him and shook my head. I advise you to tell me the truth. This? Okay, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the truth. Hearing my words, Wen Shiliang's face turned frightened. He nodded repeatedly. It seemed my Taoist technique had given him a big shock. He was silent for a while, as if organizing his words. Then, like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube, he continued, that Wu Dunka has a 7 baneful fate. The little ghost refined from the soul of this kind of person will be very powerful. It was because of his 7 baneful fate that I decided to help him. I gave him the expelling talisman with the ghost life talisman's incantation. As long as he uses the ghost life talisman, he will die. This kind of 7 fiend soul with the incantation isn't weak. The ghost refined from it will be a ghost king. With more training, it can even become a spirit. That's why I thought about it. I was blinded by greed and broke the rules of the feng shui circle. However, I still told Wu Dunka about this. He was willing to kill me. You can't blame me for this. Senior, please be merciful and let me go. No matter what conditions you have, I will agree to them all. If not, I don't want this 7 fiend soul anymore. Senior, please take it. Wen Shiliang flattered me and looked at me with a hopeful face. I couldn't help but laugh. This 7 fiend's soul sounded incredible, but it was just a ghost at the Ghost King level. In the future, it would only have a chance to become a spirit. It wasn't anything special, let alone Tong Tong. Even the well ghost I had encountered was much stronger than this 7 fiend soul. Wen Shiliang thought that I wanted to steal the 7 fiend soul. It was ridiculous. I didn't mind him and just sighed. As things had come to this, the whole thing was in order. It was a pity that Wu Dunka had helped Elder Wen Shiliang of the ghost-raising faction before his death. Thinking to this point, I sighed. Wu Dunka had used all kinds of schemes. To vent his anger, he didn't care about anything else. In the end, not only did he fail to vent his anger, but his soul also ended up like this after his death. He had brought this upon himself. As the old saying went, one shouldn't have the intention to harm others. From the moment Wu Dunka decided to harm others, his fate was already set. Senior, I've told you everything I know. Please let me go. I will change my evil ways. I won't break the rules again. I won't harm people again. Wen Shiliang became even more terrified when he saw that I didn't speak for a long time. He continued to beg, please let me go this time. I smiled non-committally and ignored his pleading. There's one more thing. Your ghost-raising sect's Grand Supreme Elder, Jiang Tianxin, is an old friend of mine. Do you know where he is? Grand Supreme Elder? Wen Shiliang's expression turned solemn when I mentioned Jiang Tianxin. He paused for a moment before continuing. The Grand Supreme Elder comes and goes like a ghost. Apart from a few close friends, I'm afraid no one knows where he is hiding. However, since Senior is an old friend of the Grand Supreme Elder, why don't you come to our sect's main altar and leave your name? Someone will naturally inform the Grand Supreme Elder. I shook my head. An old friend is an old friend. However, I'm looking for him to settle an old score. When Shiliang's pupil shrank. He couldn't speak for a long time. When I was dealing with him earlier, I had actually used my Heavenly Master technique. However, he might not have been able to see through it with his cultivation. At this moment, my words had clearly told him that I had a Heavenly Master cultivation base. It was normal for Wen Shiliang to be frightened after knowing that he had offended a Heavenly Master. I didn't have time to think about his thoughts and continued to ask, you really don't know his whereabouts? I really don't know, but Wen Shiliang was as quiet as a cicada in winter. Then, he seemed to recall something. But what? A few days ago, I heard from another elder in the sect that a rich businessman from the New Territories is going to hold a banquet in a few days and invited the Grand Supreme Elder to attend the banquet. That rich businessman is a person on the list of billionaires and has some connections in the feng shui circle of Hong Kong. It is very likely that the Grand Supreme Elder will attend the banquet, Wen Shiliang answered respectfully. Then, He didn't wait for me to ask and directly told me the story. According to him, there was a rich merchant in the new territories of Hong Kong. He was a wealthy man who often appeared in the newspapers. He had a strange dream a few days ago. He dreamt that his father was being bullied by evil spirits in the underworld. The rich merchant asked someone to check and said that the feng shui of his ancestors' grave wasn't good. It had been eroded by yin energy. That was why his business was affected. The rich merchant also knew something about feng shui. Soon, he decided to move the grave. However, this merchant wasn't an ordinary person. His family had been rich for many years. His ancestors' grave was a famous place with good feng shui in Hong Kong. Of course, he couldn't choose a random place to move the grave. At the very least, the feng shui of his ancestors' grave couldn't be worse. He couldn't make up his mind at the moment. However, this merchant was rich and didn't lack money. That was why he decided to hold a banquet in the new territories a few days later. He invited some big shots of Hong Kong's feng shui circle. He hoped that they could work together to move the grave. That merchant has a lot of money, and he attached great importance to moving the grave. He promised a lot of money. Of course, the Grand Supreme Elder doesn't like those common things. However, I heard that the merchant has collected many rare treasures in the feng shui circle. Even the Heavenly Master is interested in them. That's why the Grand Supreme Elder will go to the banquet, said Wen Shiliang. Rare treasures that even the Heavenly Master is interested in. I thought for a while and didn't really care. The glory of Knowledge Realm and the Heavenly Master Realm were only one step apart, but in fact, they were very far apart. Below the Heavenly Master, everyone was an ordinary person. They were born in the mortal world and blended with the mortal world. They weren't much different from each other. However, the Heavenly Master was beyond the mortal world. They were no different from immortals. Ordinary people could understand the power of the Earth Master, but they couldn't understand the power of the Heavenly Master. Although Hong Kong had a strong feng shui circle, I didn't think that ordinary people would have treasures that even the Heavenly Master would envy. However, if Liang Tianxin was likely to go there, I would have to go there when the time came. After asking for the merchant's name and the location of the banquet, I rubbed my chin and thought about how to deal with Wen Shiliang. This kind of person had been dealing with sorcery all year round. He didn't have a good heart. Moreover, he had an extraordinary cultivation base. If I let him live, he would be a disaster. Moreover, someone had to take responsibility for the souls that had died in the Wong Group's construction site. However, it wasn't fair to put all the blame on this person. After all, Wu Dunka was the one who had caused the Wong Group's destruction. Wen Shiliang had just given Wu Dunka a butcher's knife. What should I do with him? Wen Shiliang looked at my expression and seemed to understand what I was thinking. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed as if he was pounding garlic. He cried, "Senior, I have told you everything I know. Please spare my life. I will definitely turn over a new leaf in the future." After listening to him, I waved my hand. Wen Shiliang slumped to the ground. The yin energy in his body moved like gray snakes. They flew out of his body and dispersed into the air. I'll spare your life, but I can't let you keep your yin energy. Not only is your yin energy harmful, but the ghost-raising sex cultivation technique is also problematic. If your yin energy leaks, it will harm you and yourself. It's okay if you keep increasing your realm. However, if your talent reaches a bottleneck and your cultivation base stops advancing, the yin energy leaking from your body will harm you in your lifespan. From now on, as long as you turn over a new leaf and become an ordinary person, it won't be a problem for you to enjoy your old age, I said with a serious face. It wasn't that I was making this up. The ghost-raising sex cultivation technique was problematic. Take the corpse sect as an example. Most of the people in the corpse sect were surrounded by yin energy, but they lived deep in the mountains. In order to increase their cultivation faster, they nourished their bodies with yin energy all day long. They were not like the ghost-raising sect, where they couldn't completely control the yin energy in their bodies, causing it to leak out and harm others. After comprehending the 8th step of the 9-star Heavenly Dipper, I had the power of insight, which allowed me to see the essence of things. If when Xiliang's cultivation base continued to increase, he could live for a few more years. However, if he stopped, he would only have 10 more years to live. Moreover, even if he continued to increase his realm, his lifespan would be no more than 60 years, unless he could become a heavenly master. When Xiliang couldn't see these deep things, at this moment, his entire cultivation was destroyed, and his face was filled with pain. There was even a hint of hatred in his eyes, but he still spoke with flattery and gratitude. He said repeatedly, "I will definitely turn over a new leaf in the future. Thank you, Senior." Thank you, Senior. Of course, I wouldn't care too much about his attitude. I waved my hand and didn't bother with him anymore. I walked away. In the next few days, the Wang Group's construction site was working normally. Dai Nanzhou gradually recovered from his gloomy mood. He was busy working on the construction site every day. His cheerful personality slowly returned to normal. After work, Dai Nanzhou took the initiative to call me to go for a drive. Hong Kong was a real modern metropolis. It was very prosperous. Even at night, the lights were as bright as day. The colorful lights extended far into the distance. It was really beautiful. Besides driving, we couldn't avoid visiting shopping malls like Causeway Bay when we were in Hong Kong, a shopping paradise. In the next few days, Dai Nanzhou took me to almost every corner of Hong Kong. Of course, I didn't pay attention to clothes, shoes, and hats. Along the way, I saw some antique shops with geomancy. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything good. I didn't find any decent magical tools or the 7-star mugwort that Zhang Canwen had mentioned. I didn't feel regretful. Magical tools were carefully nurtured by geomancy masters. It was rare to see one. As for the 7-star mugwort, it was even rarer. It couldn't be found everywhere like cabbages in the market. Besides shopping, I was always on guard against the people from the ghost-raising sect. Since I couldn't kill Wen Xiliang that day, I was prepared for him to find the ghost-raising sect to take revenge on me. However, the next few days were peaceful. Wen Xiliang seemed to be scared out of his wits. Everything was calm. Chapter 466. That afternoon, after eating lunch with Dai Nanzhou, I took a taxi to the famous Skyline Marriott Hotel in New Territories. The Skyline Marriott Hotel was located at the southern end of Hong Kong, on the shore of the South Sea. The scenery was beautiful, and because it was located by the sea, it created a feeling of being far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It was very famous in Hong Kong and was one of the famous 5-star hotels in Asia. According to Wen Xiliang, the rich man's banquet was arranged in the banquet hall on the 2nd floor of this hotel. I got out of the car at the entrance of the hotel. Soon, a waiter came to greet me warmly. He didn't neglect me because I took a taxi. After asking for my destination, he led me to the banquet hall. At this time, there were many people coming and going at the entrance of the banquet hall. Among them, there were young people in suits and leather shoes, and there were also some old people in Chinese tunic suits. These people walked to the door and handed over their invitations. Immediately, there were waiters in suits who smiled and led them in. Looking at the door that opened from time to time, there were dozens of people inside. All of them had Dao Qi on them. They should be the feng shui masters that the rich man had invited. Of course, I didn't have an invitation, but it wasn't a problem for me. When I walked to the door, I silently activated the Dao Qi in my body and wrapped myself up. Then, I pushed open the door and swaggered into the banquet hall. Dao Qi had many uses. Hiding one's aura was one of them. Not only did I hide my aura, but I also hid my body. When I walked past the door, the people around me couldn't see me at all. Of course, this was only effective against people with lower cultivation than me. If their cultivation was higher than mine, they would be able to see through me. After entering, I looked around. The banquet hall was very big. At the end of the hall was an antique wall. There was a banner with 3 big words on it, Dragon Seeking Banquet. Before I came, I learned that this dragon-seeking banquet was a custom of Hong Kong. Hong Kong had always been a place of metaphysics. No matter if it was a small family or a rich merchant, they would invite a feng shui master to come and check on the situation. After inviting someone to do something, there would always be a meal to thank them. This meal was called the Dragon-Seeking Banquet. At that moment, it seemed that the rich merchant hadn't arrived yet. Most of the feng shui masters in the banquet hall were chatting in twos and threes. I looked around. Most of the people present were at the glorious memory realm. Only a few of the young people's cultivation wasn't enough and were still at the pressure point realm. I couldn't help but sigh. This was indeed Hong Kong, a place where metaphysics flourished. In the mainland, any feng shui master who had reached the state of glorious enlightenment could be the president of a city-level metaphysics society. Hong Kong, in terms of size, was several times the size of Hong Kong, not to mention a city. But on such a small piece of land, a random geomancy gathering had so many glory of consciousness realm geomancy masters appearing. It really made people speechless. It's a pity that I didn't see a single feng shui master realm feng shui master after looking around for a long time. Liang Tianxin shouldn't have arrived yet. But then again, it made sense. Liang Tianxin was a heavenly master and should be quite popular in Hong Kong. Naturally, there was no reason for him to wait here in advance. I wasn't in a hurry. I walked around and listened carefully. Most of the feng shui masters in the banquet hall were chatting with each other or talking about interesting feng shui stories that they had encountered before. Nothing much was important. However, a few people were talking about Liang Tianxin. They said that they were excited to see a heavenly master realm senior today. I smiled. When Shi Liang didn't lie to me, Liang Tianxin would most likely appear today. After confirming this, I randomly picked a place at the back and sat down. After dispersing the Tao Qi around my body, a waiter quickly brought me some tea. I took a sip and waited quietly. Around 10 minutes later, the door of the banquet hall was pushed open. An old man in a dark suit walked in with a group of people. When the feng shui masters in the banquet hall saw this man, they all stopped talking. The banquet hall became silent. At this moment, a white-haired old man behind the old man announced, "Mr. Mi Ding City has arrived." Today's guest was Mi Ding City, a wealthy Hong Kong businessman. I lifted my head to look at him. Mi Ding City was around 60 years old. He was skinny. I guessed it was because he hadn't had a good rest that he didn't look well. Moreover, his forehead was dark and sunken on both sides. His forehead was dark and gloomy, which was a sign that something bad had happened. The two sides of his forehead were where his parents' palaces were located, which symbolized the health of his parents and ancestors. According to Wen Shiliang, it seemed there was something wrong with the Mi family's ancestral grave. While I was reading his face, Mi Ding Chung walked to the center of the banquet and cupped his hands in greeting. "Gentlemen, I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to visit my humble abode." As the old man spoke, he bowed to the old man. The feng shui masters in the banquet hall stood up and waved their hands. They said, "Mr. Mi, you don't need to be so polite." After exchanging some pleasantries, Mi Ding City raised his hand to signal the others to keep quiet. Then he said, "I believe you all know why I've invited you here today." Then Mi Ding City sighed and looked sorrowful. He continued, "Recently, I've been dreaming about my father being bullied by evil spirits in the underworld. I've also made a lot of mistakes in my business. It's okay when it comes to business, but my father has worked hard for me his whole life. As his son, how could I bear to see him suffer in the underworld? Today, I've invited you here because of this. All of you here are experts in feng shui, and your cultivation base isn't ordinary. I sincerely ask you to help me solve the problem in front of me. I want to let my father's soul rest in peace in the underworld. Then, I will have fulfilled my duty as a son." Mi Ding City bowed to the crowd again. His words and actions were full of sincerity. The crowd quickly stood up. A dark, skinny old man in the front row said to Mi Ding City, "Mr. Mi, you're too kind. Everyone in Hong Kong knows that Mr. Mi is the leader of Hong Kong's business world. You've given us face by inviting us here today. As long as we can do something, no one would dare to hide it. You don't need to be so polite, Mr. Mi." The feng shui masters all chimed in, showing their respect for Mi Ding City. "Mr. Ma Jinkoen, you're a senior in the feng shui sect. Your words put me at ease." The feng shui master who spoke just now seemed to be familiar with Mi Ding City. Mi Ding City stroked his beard and responded with a smile. Ha! Elder Me is a man of virtue and prestige. Since there's a need for us geomancers today, we're all willing to climb mountains of blades and swim through seas of fire for it. Elder Me, please tell us what's going on. Mi Ding City stroked his beard. There's no hurry. Everyone here is one of the top masters in Hong Kong, and you all have deep attainments in feng shui. Now that I've taken up so much of your time, I already feel bad about it. How can I let you all starve and listen to this old man's story? Come, let's eat first. I'll tell you in detail after dinner. Mi Ding City clapped his hands, and the waiter began to serve the dishes. The food was sumptuous, but the people here were all big shots. Their minds weren't on the food. Most of them picked a few mouthfuls and finished the meal hastily. Seeing that everyone was almost done, the waiter brought some refreshments and tea. Mi Ding City said, "Since I've invited you here today, I won't let you come for nothing. All the gentlemen present today will receive a reward of $500,000 each. In addition, I'll also reward you handsomely for helping my Mi family out of this disaster. I'm sure you'll be satisfied." All the feng shui masters cheered when they heard Mi Ding City's words. Those who were qualified to attend the meeting were all influential people. 500,000 might not be a big deal, but Mi Ding City was a wealthy businessman and had a high status in Hong Kong. It was an honor to be paid by Mi Ding City. Only I didn't feel anything. I wasn't from Hong Kong. Although I'd heard of Mi Ding City's fame, I didn't feel proud. Moreover, I was here to find Liang Tianxin. I was getting impatient since he hadn't shown up yet. However, Mi Ding City began to tell me the story of his family. Since I had nothing to do, I calmed down and listened. Although I have some property now, I was born poor when I was young. My father ran a small grocery business to support his family. Later on, he met a beggar who had fled from the mainland. Mi Ding City's voice was sad as he told the story of the Mi family. Back then, Mi Ding City's father ran a small grocery store. At that time, Hong Kong's economy was poor, and people didn't have much money. Their purchasing power was limited, and they had a lot of children. However, Mi Ding City's father was a kind man. When he met the old beggar outside his grocery store, he saw that the beggar was sick and had no one to rely on. He didn't have the heart to drive the beggar away. After thinking for a while, he gritted his teeth and took the beggar into his store. He took good care of the beggar for many days and saved his life. From then on, the old beggar stayed with the Mi family. Mi Ding City's father took good care of him. Once the family bought a carp. Before his wife and children could eat it, Mi Ding City's father brought a bowl of fish soup to the beggar. He said that the soup was good for the body and that the beggar needed it more. "Dad, we have nothing to do with this old beggar. We've been taking care of him for so long, but he hasn't gotten any better. Do you still want to take care of him until he dies? Life at home has always been tight. Not to mention the fact that we can't feed so many mouths. It's not easy for us to see meat and fish, but you've given it all to him." Hearing the children cry like that, as a mother, I feel terrible. His wife complained about Mi Ding City's father more than once. However, Mi Ding City's father couldn't kick the old beggar out no matter what. He still took care of the poor man like he did his own father. Unfortunately, the old beggar didn't make it through the winter of that year. That winter was unusually cold in Hong Kong. The old beggar's body was weak. He lay on the bed, wrapped in several layers of blankets, but there wasn't a trace of warmth. He didn't last long before he died. The day before he died, he struggled to call Mi Ding City's father to his bedside. It was the first time he spoke to Mi Ding City's father in days. "You're a good person. I've been eating and living with you for so long, but I can't repay you. I can only give you a piece of good fortune to thank you for taking care of me these days." The old beggar spoke in a serious tone, but Mi Ding City's father thought it was absurd. He thought to himself, "You're just a penniless old beggar. How can you give me a piece of good fortune when you're about to die?" Although the old beggar was down and out, he was also weather-beaten. He knew what Mi Ding City's father was thinking at a glance. He said with difficulty, "Don't look down on this old beggar's good fortune. Fate is determined by heaven, but feng shui is determined by man. As long as you listen to me, I can guarantee that your family's wealth will continue. Mi Ding City's father listened to the old beggar's words and became serious. He asked the old man for guidance. The old beggar was about to die. He talked for a while, rested for a while, and gestured with his hands. After a long time, he told Mi Ding City's father 5 locations. He said that they were the 5 graves he had chosen. After making sure that Mi Ding City's father remembered the locations, the old beggar grabbed Mi Ding City's father's hand and said solemnly, "These 5 graves, 1 ominous and 4 auspicious. After I die, you don't need a coffin. Just wrap me in a straw mat and bury me in that ominous cave. Remember, and Yumi family's grave will be moved to." Unfortunately, the old beggar breathed his last at this moment. Mi Ding City's father was confused at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he felt that the old beggar wouldn't say anything wrong before he died. Therefore, he followed the old beggar's instructions and buried him in that ominous cave. Then, based on his shallow knowledge of feng shui, he moved his family's grave to a place that he thought had good feng shui. The second year after he moved his family's grave, Mi Ding City's father hit the jackpot and quickly became rich. Since then, the Mi family's children were filial and the family business grew bigger and bigger. In recent years, the Mi family had become the biggest family in Hong Kong. Outsiders didn't know, but Mi Ding City knew very well that the Mi family's prosperity was all because of the old beggar's protection. Mi Ding City's tears flowed down his face. I sent people to investigate. That old beggar was a feng shui master from the mainland. He was persecuted and fled to Hong Kong. After I found out his name, I set up a memorial tablet for him at home. I thought that with his guidance, the Mi family would be prosperous for generations to come. I didn't expect that so many things would happen. I couldn't figure out the reason at first, but when I recalled what my father had told me, I thought that perhaps the old man had already predicted that our Mi family would end up like this. So he pointed out the 4 auspicious acupoints. So, after much consideration, I decided to move my family's grave. The young feng shui master Huang's previous words were indeed a little impolite. At this time, his face turned red. Since he was in the wrong, he didn't dare to argue anymore. He just replied politely in a low voice, "Everyone's horoscope is different. Marshal Uncle Liu hasn't come to the scene to investigate, nor has he asked for the old beggar and the Mi family's ancestors' birth date. It's a little arbitrary to make such a conclusion." Oomph. The white-haired old man flicked his sleeves and snorted coldly. He didn't say anything else, as if he disdained to pay any attention to him. "What the 2 of you have said is correct. Elder Lu's words were words of experience, and Brother Huang's words were also words of wisdom. You and I haven't been to the scene yet, so it's inconvenient for us to make a conclusion. As for the actual map, we'll naturally come to a conclusion after we do a field investigation." Seeing that the 2 were arguing fiercely, a fat feng shui master walked out to smooth things over. However, his words seemed to be biased towards the young man surnamed Huang. With someone smoothing things over, the old man surnamed Liu and the young man surnamed Huang both took a step back and didn't argue anymore. Ma Zhengquan, who was sitting to the side, stroked his goatee and smiled at everyone. What the several Taoists said is reasonable. In the path of feng shui, it's a good thing that everyone can argue about it. Now that we've discussed it, why don't we let Mr. Mi take us to the scene to investigate? Hearing this, Mi Ding Chung smiled. "This is my fault. I haven't taken everyone to the scene yet, and I'm begging everyone to make a decision. Haha, it's my fault. If everyone is ready, I'll take everyone to the tombs." As he said so, everyone stood up and excitedly prepared to set off with Mi Ding City. I sat in the corner, my eyebrows slightly furrowed. Mi Ding Cheng's story was quite interesting, and I was quite interested in the old beggar's tombs. However, my purpose in coming here is Liang Tianxin. The banquet is about to end. Could it be that Jiang Tianxin won't come? Just as I was getting impatient and was about to think of another method, Mi Ding Cheng gestured for the feng shui masters to calm down. Once everyone quieted down, Mi Ding Cheng waved his hand at the person beside him. Someone immediately came over with a wooden tray. The tray was covered with red silk, making it impossible to see what was on it. However, judging from me, Ding Cheng's solemn expression, it seemed to be something extraordinary. As I said before, everyone who came to the banquet will receive a reward of 500,000. However, I know that everyone here is a senior expert in feng shui and won't care about gold and silver. Therefore, in addition to the reward, if you can choose the best feng shui from the 3 tombs and help me resolve my doubts, I will reward you handsomely. As he spoke, he walked over and removed the red silk covering the wooden tray. Everyone's eyes were drawn to it. Even I came over to take a look. After one look, I couldn't look away. On the small wooden tray, there were 3 wooden boxes. At this moment, the wooden boxes' lids were all open. From left to right, there was a century-old ginseng emitting dense spiritual energy, a small vermilion stone, and a green leaf. A century-old ginseng was naturally not an ordinary item. The dense spiritual energy it emitted was very beneficial to cultivators. As for the vermilion stone, if I wasn't mistaken, it was a cinnabar stone. Cinnabar stone was one of the 4 national stones of China. It was the best of the bloodstones. It had an extraordinary effect on exorcism and was extremely valuable. If an ordinary person carried it with them, they would be immune to all kinds of demons. For cultivators, it was the best material for making ritual implements. To be able to bring out these 2 items proved that Mi Ding Cheng had put in a lot of effort. However, what really attracted my attention was the item in the 3rd wooden box, which was the green leaf. This green leaf looked ordinary at first glance, but if you looked closely, you could see some dark silver marks on the green leaf. There were 7 dark silver marks in total, and each of them was in the shape of a star. This was the 7-star mugwort leaf that Zhang Canwen had told me about a few days ago. After Zhang Canwen had told me about it, I had asked him about it in detail and read through some materials to memorize the appearance of this 7-star mugwort leaf. My original intention was to search for it when I had the chance in the future. I didn't expect to see this item in just half a month. However, according to Zhang Canwen, we needed the whole 7-star mugwort leaf to save Wang Li. Now, we only had 1 leaf, which was far from enough. However, this mugwort leaf in Mi Ding Cheng's hand must have a source. As long as we could get it from him, we would be able to get information about the whole 7-star mugwort leaf. After taking out these items, Mi Ding Cheng began to explain to everyone with a smile. Some of the geomancy masters with good eyesight opened their eyes wide when they saw these items. Some of the less knowledgeable ones couldn't help but look greedy after Mi Ding Cheng's explanation. In short, these 3 items had completely attracted the geomancy masters, making them even more excited. I wasn't an exception. At first, I thought that since Jiang Tianxin hadn't appeared yet, I didn't need to stay here any longer. However, after seeing this 7-star mugwort leaf, I couldn't move my feet anymore. After thinking for a while, I followed the others to meet Ding Cheng. Compared to finding Liang Tianxin, the 7-star mugwort leaf was more important. When we left the hotel, Mi Ding Cheng had already arranged a car to take us to the graveyards he had mentioned. First, Mi Ding Cheng took us to the grave cave where the old beggar was buried. After we got out of the car, I lowered my head and looked around. I couldn't help but frown. The other geomancy masters had the same expression as me. More or less, they were all shocked. The lone grave in front of him was located on a flat, open land. It protruded abruptly, its head protruded, and there seemed to be 5 claws at the bottom. After the erosion of wind and rain for a long time, the 5 claws had become particularly sharp. That's the heavenly dipper tiger palm. It's extremely ominous. An old man in a Taoist robe grabbed a horsetail whisk and screamed. The old Taoist wasn't lying. According to the jewel illumination scripture, the lone grave had a heavenly dipper body and a sharp foot. It was called the heavenly dipper tiger palm. This star was extremely malicious. Even if you had 5 lucky stars to form an acupoint, you wouldn't be able to use it. Especially in a flat area like this, the heavenly dipper tiger palm was a disaster. No one could solve it. Although the geomancy technique required an evil cave, I was surprised that the old beggar had chosen such a dangerous grave. This cave is too dangerous, let alone nurturing it. It's hard to even enter the cycle of reincarnation, said a middle-aged man with a strange aura. This middle-aged man was around 40 years old. His face was pale, and he had a faint wisp of Yin energy. Apparently, he was someone who practiced evil techniques. I sank into my thoughts and carefully checked the surroundings of the grave. There was no shelter around the grave. From the flow of the water, sand, and stones, I could tell that this was a grave with no descendants. It was a place with the most malicious geomancy. I had no doubt about it. He dared to bury his body in such an evil cave. I closed my eyes and pondered. I was afraid that even with my current cultivation, I wouldn't dare to do that. The old beggar's attainment in geomancy wasn't bad. Since we had reached a consensus on the geomancy of this grave, Mi Dingsheng didn't say anything. He took us to another graveyard. This graveyard was the ancestral grave of the Mi family. It was where Mi Dingsheng's father had buried his ancestor. People could see through the heavenly dipper tiger palm at first glance, but the geomancy of the Mi family's ancestral grave in front of us wasn't. I had to check for a long time to see through it. The Mi family's ancestral grave was located in a hilly area. The stars were upright, and there were many small veins on the left and right. The curve in the front was long and sharp, while the small vein in the center was connected to a semicircular mound. Moreover, this place used sand to seal the acupoints. It seemed to be based on the direction, which was quite rare. Everyone frowned and pondered. After a long time, an old geomancy master said hesitantly, "Could this be the Xiang'e Linjing Long?" This is the acupoint of greedy wolf Fu Bai, and there is no Yin Zhen as the ancestor. It's easy to get an official title, but not the three dukes. The old man who spoke was about 70 years old. He had a goatee, and his chi of Tao was very weak. I'm afraid he was only at the acupoint sealing realm. However, his attainment in geomancy was not bad. Besides me, he was the first one to see through the geomancy. After being reminded by him, the other geomancy masters all slapped their heads. Wasn't this the Xiang'e Linjing Long? According to the shocking dragon scripture, this kind of geomancy hid a calamity in a blessing. The descendants were smart and knowledgeable, and most of them could become officials in one go. However, because it was the acupoint of greedy wolf Fu Bai, they needed the protection of Mount Shao. Otherwise, they wouldn't be the three dukes, and wealth wouldn't be passed down for 3 generations. In layman's terms, this acupoint was a little strange. It was considered an auspicious acupoint, but it hid a calamity. It depended on whether the life palace of the buried person was strong enough to withstand the calamity. If it couldn't, the auspicious acupoint would only last for 3 generations. After that, it would bring calamity to the descendants, and they wouldn't be able to protect them for eternity. Although this kind of geomancy was rare, it coincided with the heavens. It was like the Han people used to give their children despicable names like Stone and Tile. It was said that when it came to reincarnation, such despicable names couldn't enter the reincarnation cycle of humans or animals. Since they couldn't easily fall into the reincarnation cycle, they could naturally live to 100 years old. Therefore, despicable names contained the humblest expectations of their fathers. Of course, after the despicable nicknames, they would often come up with a great name. For example, the name of the founder of the current dynasty was meant to nourish the East. However, people were born with a great life, and it was enough to support this great name. It was the same for choosing ancestral graves. Some had excellent geomancy, and their ancestors' bones were buried there, and their descendants would have a long life of good fortune. Of course, this was the best place to fix the acupoint. However, there were also some geomancy that could also bring good fortune to the descendants. However, it was similar to the old beggar's luck-changing technique. The auspicious acupoint also needed to be supported by a noble fate, the family's fate, and the ancestors' fate. Otherwise, it would be like a child carrying a stone that weighed several hundred pounds. If he couldn't support it, he would be crushed. The string song facing the political dragon in front of us was like this. The geomancy of this place was excellent, but it wasn't something an ordinary person could control. Since Mi's father had been poor for half of his life, he didn't have a great life. Thinking about this, I was a little suspicious. If Mi's father had a poor life, why did the old man who was good at geomancy give him such a place? Although this kind of place could bring him wealth temporarily, it would all be for naught. The old beggar said that it was good fortune, but it wasn't good fortune at all. Chapter 468. The past couldn't be investigated. Dozens of years had passed, and we couldn't figure out why the old man chose this grave for the Mi family. We couldn't figure it out just by looking at the tomb's geomancy. Thus, we didn't linger on this issue. After a short discussion, we followed Mi Ding Chung to the third tomb. Today, the most important thing was to find a good grave for the Mi family. The third grave was located on a small mountain ridge. However, this ridge wasn't the usual one that extended far away. Instead, it had 3 oval-shaped ridges that extended in the same direction. This is Little Treasure's tomb. My grave is here, and it can bless my descendants with wealth and riches. There is no need to talk about great wealth. As soon as we saw this auspicious cave, the young man with the surname Huang, who knew the crepe myrtle star dough technique, was the first to speak. After explaining, he came to a conclusion. This cave is priceless. I think the Mi family should move their grave here. Although his words were full of confidence, everyone agreed with him. Even the old man, surnamed Liu, who was glaring at him, didn't say anything to refute him. I also looked around and nodded. This was indeed a good grave. Moreover, the mountain in front of us was famous for its geomancy. The Chalcedony Sutra had an introduction about this kind of terrain. In geomancy, this place was called the Treasure Cave, or the Fortune Star. If the grave was located here, the future generations would be rich. Although they couldn't be bestowed the title of Marquis or Prime Minister, they would be rich and have a long life. After the young man with the surname Huang came to a conclusion, he became even more excited. The Mi family is one of the wealthiest families in Hong Kong. As the saying goes, it's not easy to conquer a country, but it's even harder to defend it. It's not easy for the future generations to protect such a great fortune. Although the geomancy of this place isn't that of a real dragon, it's the best place for the Mi family to pursue a long life of riches. Previously, Mi Ding Chung had said that whoever could find the auspicious acupuncture point and explain the principles behind it could take away the 3 treasures after gaining its approval. After the young man, surnamed Huang, finished speaking, he couldn't wait to reveal a happy expression on his face. At this moment, the old Taoist priest shook his head. Little friend Huang, you're wrong. This auspicious cave was indeed a pattern of riches and honor, but it was more conservative than aggressive. As the saying goes, water flows to the lowest point, and people walk to the highest point. If the choice of ancestral grave is so conservative, how can the family business advance further? Moreover, the Mi family still has 2 choice acupoints, and they are both auspicious acupoints. Why not look at those 2 acupoints before making a decision? The geomancy master, surnamed Huang, seemed to want to refute, but he opened his mouth and didn't say anything. He only said that the other 2 auspicious acupoints could be looked at, but no matter how good the other 2 were, he had already made up his mind to choose this one. Mi Ding Chung did not express his opinion. He smiled and encouraged Master Huang, saying that he would definitely consider this matter seriously. Then, he stood up and led everyone to the remaining 2 tombs. I smiled faintly and followed him. The feng shui of the first location was pretty good, but it wasn't as simple as the young man with the surname Huang said. If he wanted to be rich and powerful, just a small treasure like a dragon wouldn't be enough. However, I wasn't in a hurry to talk about it. After checking the feng shui of the other 2 locations, I would be able to make a decision. The young man with the surname Huang had taken the first option. If the others wanted to get the 3 treasures, they would have to go to the other 2 locations. That was why people were eager to try. They were excited along the way. Soon, we checked the other 2 locations. The feng shui of the other two locations didn't look suspicious. All the geomancy masters there recognized them. One of them had several peaks, which was a good acupoint for flying moths. The other one was on a small mountain with a flat top. It was called the Rising Sky Acupoint. In the art of Xianglong, flying moths were the auspicious acupoints, which meant that they would be rich and then noble. As for the Rising Sky Acupoint, it was even more noble. It was the Rising Sky Acupoint for the children and grandchildren. As a result, all the feng shui masters were silent. The feng shui of the other three tombs weren't bad. The small treasure acupoint could protect the children and grandchildren, the good acupoint for flying moths to be rich and then noble, and the Rising Sky Acupoint was the acupoint for the true dragon. In terms of feng shui, the Rising Sky Acupoint was the best. There was no doubt about that. However, the auspicious acupoint needed to be supported by the noble acupoint. Considering the situation of the Mi family, no one could give a complete explanation as to which one to choose. In my opinion, it should be the last one, the Rising Sky Acupoint. The old man in the Taoist robe who refuted geomancy master Huang spoke first. The Mi family is rich now, but it's not as rich as noble. If that's the case, why don't the Mi family look higher? As far as I know, Elder Mi has two sons who are in their prime. Why not move the ancestral grave here and send the younger generation to Qingyan? As soon as he finished speaking, someone else expressed a different opinion. I don't think it's appropriate. The Mi family is rich now. It's best to move forward steadily. If we really move the ancestral grave here and it can't support this fate, won't it be harmful? Yeah, I think so too. There's a saying in Tao, the way of heaven takes away the surplus and makes up for the deficiency. The Mi family has the ancestors' blessing, and we're rich now. If we don't have enough people, I'm afraid it's inappropriate. In my opinion, there's no harm in choosing a slow path. The flying moth's auspicious acupoint fits the pattern of getting rich first and then being noble. It's more suitable as a new grave. This old man was a steady person. The flying moth's acupoint was a moderate one. It wasn't conservative or reckless, so it was more suitable. However, I frowned. These three places weren't as simple as they looked. I thought the small treasure lid and the flying moth's acupoint weren't bad, but they weren't as perfect as they thought. There were some flaws. However, the last one, the Rising Sky Acupoint, was wonderful. It was a bit exaggerated to call it a true dragon's acupoint, but it was indeed an excellent, auspicious acupoint. However, I was even more puzzled. These were all auspicious acupoints. That year, the old beggar had chosen the best one and told me Papa. Why did he drag it out and tell me Papa to remember it? It didn't make sense. Everyone debated for a long time, but no one could convince the other. Seeing that it was getting late, Mi Ding Chung stood up and persuaded everyone to return to the hotel. He said it wouldn't be too late to discuss it during the banquet. No one objected and followed Mi Ding Chung back to the hotel. After returning to the hotel, Mi Ding Chung prepared the banquet. However, no one's mind was on the banquet. They were either deep in thought or whispering to each other. Suddenly, an old man in a suit rushed in and whispered something to Mi Ding Chung. Mi Ding Chung's face lit up. He stood up and said to everyone, for this dragon-seeking banquet, I've not only invited all of you, but I've also invited Master Liang Tian Xian. He's already outside the hotel and will be here soon. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. They hurried to stand up and greeted him. They didn't have time to discuss feng shui anymore. I was also surprised. After thinking for a while, I quickly took out the EMO bead and changed my appearance when no one was looking. My original intention was to ask Liang Tian Xian about what happened in the past, so I didn't need to hide myself. However, after seeing the mugwort leaf that Mi Ding Chung took out, I changed my mind. It's better not to have any conflict with Liang Tian Xian. It won't be too late to find trouble with him after I get the 7-star mugwort leaf. Soon, an old man in brown appeared at the door. I raised my head and saw that it was the ghost-raising sect supreme elder, Liang Tian Xian. As soon as Liang Tianxin appeared, all the feng shui masters present greeted him in unison, and they were extremely respectful. Liang Tian Xian's face was cold. He didn't pay attention to them. He didn't even retract his heavenly master aura. He walked in with a heavy pressure and sat down on the seat of honor. Due to their status, no one dared to take the initiative to talk to Liang Tianxin, even though there were many feng shui masters present. It was me, Dingsheng, who was the first to speak to Liang Tianxin in an ingratiating manner. He smiled and said to Liang Tianxin, "It is my great honor that Master Liang could attend my dragon hunting banquet today." Liang Tian Xian shook his head. "Since Mr. Mi invited me, of course, I have to come." No. Mi Dingsheng waved his hand and apologized. "Master Liang is the leader of metaphysics in Hong Kong. I shouldn't disturb you. It's just that the relocation of the ancestral graves concerns the life and death of my Mi family. That's why I invited you. Please don't blame me, Master Liang." Liang Tian Xian shook his head again. "Feng Shui doesn't care about one's cultivation. I'm in this line of work. I study all the Feng Shui in the world to get closer to the Tao. Mr. Mi's invitation doesn't count." Although the old man's face was cold, his words showed respect to Mi Dingcheng. Mi Dingcheng also felt proud of himself. He smiled and said, "Actually, Master Liang doesn't have to come in person. I've already sent detailed photos of the graveyards to you. If Master Liang could take a look and pass on a message, I will be eternally grateful. I didn't expect you to come in person. This is really, I don't deserve it." He talked a lot, but Liang Tian Xian was a little impatient. He waved his hand and said, "It's just a gift. Mr. Mi has given me a lot of money, so of course I have to come. There's no need to be so polite. Besides, I'm quite interested in the 7-star mugwort leaf that Mr. Mi promised today. I'm here to take it." 7-star mugwort leaf? Mi Dingxing was taken aback, but he quickly reacted and said, "Master Liang, are you talking about that green leaf?" He clapped his hands in annoyance and continued, "If I knew Master Liang was interested in that leaf, I would have sent it to you earlier, but it doesn't matter. I have another one with me. Please wait a moment, Master Liang. I'll get someone to bring it over." "There's another one?" Liang Tianxin was taken aback at first, and then a hint of joy appeared on his face. He nodded and said, "It's even better to have 2 leaves. I'm going to take both of them today." Mi Dingqing's expression changed slightly as he said, awkwardly, "Since Master Liang has spoken, I will not refuse. It's just that I have promised that I will give a leaf to anyone who can help me make the decision." "It's not a good time to—" Before he could finish, Liang Tianxin waved his hand nonchalantly. "Of course, I won't do something like that by force. There's no need to change Mr. Mi's promise. I'll just help you settle this matter." Mi Dingqing already had the intention of getting Liang Tian Xian on board. He was overjoyed and nodded. "It's great that Master Liang is willing to help. You're the acknowledged leader in the Feng Shui circle in Hong Kong. With Master Liang's help, the 2 leaves won't fall into anyone else's hands." As soon as he finished speaking, he seemed as if he was deeply afraid that Liang Tianxin would go back on his word. So he hurriedly went back to the main topic and continued. "It's already late today, so why don't Master Liang rest in my humble abode for a night? Tomorrow morning, I'll lead the way for Master Liang to go to those 3 places of selection and investigate them in detail." Liang Tian Xian shook his head. "There's no need for an on-site survey. I've seen the pictures you sent earlier and have some understanding of the 3 sites." "You've seen them?" Mi Dingcheng was overjoyed. "In your opinion, where should I move my ancestral grave?" Liang Tian Xian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to look at the Feng Shui masters in front of him. After a moment of silence, he said, "Before I came in, I heard you talking about the Feng Shui of the 3 sites. I thought you were all famous people in the Hong Kong Feng Shui circle. I didn't expect that after listening to you for a long time, all you said were vulgar words." After Liang Tianxin's arrival, these geomancy masters had already held their breaths, not daring to speak. Now that they suddenly heard his criticism, they were even more embarrassed, and no one dared to refute him. Liang Tian Xian didn't care about their reactions. He just stood up and walked forward. Suddenly, he asked, "What is Feng Shui?" Before anyone could answer, Liang Tian Xian answered his own question. "The turning of a river is Feng Shui. The appearance of a stone in a pond is also feng shui. Since ancient times, the feng shui of dead houses in China has been focused on dragon cave sandwater. Choosing a dead house not only requires finding the dragon cave, but also distinguishing the water from the sand. Everyone was talking about where the dragon vein came from. Why didn't anyone distinguish between sand and water? Hearing this, the feng shui masters looked at each other. After a while, one of them said, "Perfected Master Liang, it's not that we don't know how to distinguish between sand and water. It's just that the art of sand and water is broad and profound. With our level of cultivation, it's impossible for us to distinguish between sand and water. What's more, sand and water doesn't have much effect on feng shui. That's why there aren't many experts." Idiot! Before he could finish, Liang Tian Xian scolded him. "Hong Kong has always been known as the capital of feng shui. I didn't expect these young people to be so ridiculous." Hearing his scolding, the dozens of feng shui masters, from the white-haired old man to the young man, didn't dare to speak. Everyone listened respectfully. Liang Tian Xian shook his head. He seemed to be very dissatisfied with these young feng shui masters. After a while, he continued. Chapter 469. After discussing the importance of sand water in the study of feng shui, Liang Tianxin sighed. He swept his gaze over the crowd and said, "The theory of sand water is indeed difficult. One needs to distinguish the 9 colors, recognize the 9 stars, hear about wealth, official, father, son, brother, and understand life, prosperity, slavery, evil, and release. With your level of cultivation, it is indeed difficult to distinguish. However, the path of cultivation is a difficult one. If you stop because it is difficult, how can you surpass yourself and make further progress? As for saying that sand water is useless, that is even more ridiculous. Countless sages have written about sand water, such as Master Yang's Shaking the Dragon, Doubting the Dragon, Zixia Sanren's Secret of the Jade Letter, and even He Tu and Luo Shui. If sand water is really useless, why do they need to study it? Do you think that you have already seen more than these sages? Why is Hong Kong the capital of feng shui? That is the result of the real skills of the older generation. You rely on the luck of the older generation to make a living in this line of work. Instead of thinking of the older generation's kindness, you work hard to promote it. Instead, you only care about enjoying life and don't dare to study hard. That's not all. How dare you say that sand water is useless just because you don't know anything about sand water? How stupid and arrogant are you? Hearing his scolding, the feng shui masters were even more embarrassed. They all lowered their heads and blamed themselves. They didn't even dare to look up at Liang Tianxin. After the scolding, Liang Tianxin didn't say anything more. He calmed down a bit and took out a thick stack of photos. They were the photos of the graves that Mi Ding City had sent him. He pointed at the graves and began to explain them to the crowd. The first one is where the Mi family's ancestral grave is. Although it is difficult to support the family's fortune, the sand water is good. This is the broken sand. If it is broken on flat ground, the sand water will be round and clean. Although the acupoint is dangerous, it can also protect the future generations. Also, the flying moth and Xiaobao are good. The sand water is round and clean. It is a good acupoint, but it can't be used because it can't pass through the room. As for the last one, it's the Imperial Dragon Pagoda. This acupoint is a major acupoint. Even kings, marquises, and generals can bury each other. However, this acupoint is still difficult to call itself a true dragon. The situation is rather tense, and the energy is dissipating. Counting it, only half the effort is needed. However, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Although this acupoint only has half of the chi flow, it is still a rare, auspicious acupoint. In my opinion, it is most appropriate for Mr. Me to move the ancestral grave here. After analyzing the pros and cons one by one, Jiang Tianxin came to a conclusion. It should be said that Liang Tianxin's insights were indeed extraordinary. Whether it was searching for the dragon or looking at the sand, they were all very appropriate. Not to mention that he was a heavenly master, and no one dared to offend him. His speech alone was the one with the deepest insights among all of them. The best thing was that Liang Tianxin's explanation of looking at the sand could explain the Mi family's ancestral grave being lucky. According to Liang Tianxin, the dragon facing the sky was not a good feng shui for the ordinary Mi family, but because of the protection of the sand and stones around the graveyard, it allowed the descendants to obtain wealth. However, the sand and stones were fickle, and it was hard to predict good luck. Now that decades had passed, the blessing of the sand and stones had long dissipated, so the dragon facing the sky could no longer protect the descendants of the Mi family. That was why the Mi family suffered a series of disasters. Based on the analysis of the sand and stones, there was no need to compare the remaining 3 spots to choose an auspicious acupoint. The speech was reasonable, and no one could refute it. All the feng shui masters present praised it at the same time, expressing their admiration. Liang Tianxin naturally ignored these people. He only nodded and smiled at Miding City. Moving the graves should be done as soon as possible. Tomorrow is the auspicious day. The sooner we finish moving the graves, the sooner the Mi family can enjoy the blessings. From what he said, it was obvious that he had decided to move the graves of the Mi family. Miding City cupped his hands and thanked him. Master Liang is indeed a feng shui master of Hong Kong. His speech was so profound that even I, a layman in feng shui, felt that Master Zhang's words were reasonable. Tomorrow, I will move the graves according to Master Liang's words. After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Liang Tianxin to ask again. He directly ordered the servants at the side to bring over the 3 treasures and the 7-star mugwort leaf that he had promised earlier. He placed them in front of Liang Tianxin and said with a smile, "These are the items that I promised earlier. Please accept them, Master Liang." All the feng shui masters were envious when they saw these items. However, Liang Tianxin was the one sitting there, so they could only watch. They didn't dare to have any other thoughts. Liang Tianxin smiled. His face was still cold as he raised his hand to take the mugwort leaf. Right at this moment, I took a step forward and said loudly, "Wait." Hearing my voice, everyone was startled and turned to look at me in unison. Liang Tianxin withdrew his hand. He frowned at me and asked, "Young friend, why are you speaking at this time? Do you have something to say?" Although his voice was calm, there was a hint of coldness in it. I smiled. "I don't have anything to say. It's just that I don't think it's safe for you to judge the feng shui of this place just by looking at the sand." As soon as I said that, everyone was in an uproar. Before Liang Tianxin could speak, a white-haired old man scolded me. "Kid, let's not talk about feng shui. Do you know who Senior Liang is? How dare you call him fellow Taoist? Which family in Hong Kong are you from? Didn't your parents teach you manners?" Although I had concealed my aura, I still didn't want to call Liang Tianxin Senior or Master. After hearing what he said, I didn't mind and continued with a smile. Fellow Taoist Jiang is a Grand Supreme Elder of the Ghost-Raising Sect. His cultivation is indeed extraordinary, but today is a feng shui event. Only feng shui knowledge is discussed, not cultivation. Although what fellow Taoist Jiang said earlier was correct, the Mi family's feng shui layout was wrong. There is no limit to learning, and those who have reached the feng shui first come first. Is there a problem with me calling him fellow Taoist? You. That person's face turned red after being rebuked by me, but he couldn't say anything. Liang Tianxin was so angry that he laughed. Fellow Taoist is right. There is no limit to learning in feng shui, and those who have reached the feng shui first come first. May I know where this fellow Taoist is from, and where is his master? As he spoke, Jiang Tianxin stood up and revealed his heavenly master cultivation, bringing with it an extremely powerful pressure. In terms of cultivation, he might not be my match. Naturally, I didn't care. With a smile on my face, I said, "I come from the mainland. As for my master, I don't have one. I only study feng shui on my own." "You're from the mainland?" Before Liang Tianxin could speak, Ma Zhengquan, who was standing next to him, seemed to look down on the mainland. He immediately stood up and looked at me with disdain. Although feng shui originated from the mainland has been in turmoil for many years, and feng shui has long been abandoned. Hong Kong, on the other hand, is widely recognized as the capital of feng shui. You're just a country bumpkin from the mainland with your shallow skills. You might be able to deceive people in your mainland, but you dare to talk nonsense here in Hong Kong? In Master Liang's words, "You're too presumptuous." I turned to look at him. This person was interesting. He was a feng shui practitioner, yet he looked down on the mainland. It sounded like a Tai Chi practitioner looking down on the Chun family's ditch. It was ridiculous. I shook my head. "Mr. Ma, your words are ridiculous. Since you know that feng shui originated from the mainland, how could you dare to say such words? Since you want to borrow fellow Taoist Liang's words, I'll borrow fellow Taoist Liang's words as well. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse." Although the development of feng shui in the mainland has been stagnant in the past few years, its foundation is still profound. Moreover, it has been developing vigorously in the past few years. How could a small place like Hong Kong compare to it? If people respect me, I will respect them tenfold. Since this old man was so rude, I didn't need to give him face. "You." Ma Zhenkuan was enraged. He pointed at me and scolded me. However, he didn't know what to say. Liang Tianxin's face became solemn. He frowned at me and said, "Boy from the mainland. Very good. Let's not talk about which part of the mainland and Hong Kong has the best feng shui. Today, we're looking at the Mi family's feng shui. You said that I was wrong about the feng shui layout. Very well. If you point out my mistake, I'll call you my friend. Otherwise, I'll have to help your family's elders teach you manners." I smiled and nodded. I didn't argue and asked for the photos of the graveyard from Liang Tianxin's hands. The feng shui path was broad and profound. Liang Tianxin had studied the Mi family's feng shui from the Dragon Cave sandwater. Previously, I had the same opinion as him. I could only see the sand water, and I could barely explain it. However, after Liang Tianxin showed up and showed me the photos, I understood something. After carefully checking each graveyard, I smiled and took out a picture I had taken from the sky, showing it to Liang Tianxin. Chapter 470. When Liang Tianxin saw my action, his eyes turned to the picture. He stared at it for a long time, but didn't say anything. When he finally lifted his head, I smiled and asked, "Taoist Liang, do you see any clues?" "Clues? I think you're just trying to be mysterious," Liang Tianxin said coldly. "Just now, when you questioned me, I thought you were a feng shui master of this continent. It turns out that you just connected these geomancy locations. What are you trying to say? Did these geomancy locations form some kind of formation? Feng shui has its own layout. You connected these geomancy locations. Do you want to dismember the Mi family's ancestor and bury him in his own place? Oof. You look mysterious, but you're just trying to be mysterious." Hearing Liang Tianxin's words, the others also agreed and mocked me. Their words were full of disdain for the feng shui masters of this continent. They were just a bunch of clowns. I didn't care about them and just turned to Mi Ding Cheng. "Mr. Mi, can you tell me your father's 8 characters of birth?" "This." Mi Ding Cheng hesitated and turned to look at Liang Tianxin. When Liang Tianxin nodded, he smiled at me. "Of course, no problem." Then, he took a pen and paper and wrote down his father's 8 characters of birth. I took the paper and checked. Although the feng shui masters here were shallow and narrow-minded, the strong feng shui of Hong Kong was undeniable. Mi Ding Cheng was just a rich businessman, but he could directly write down his father's 8 characters of birth instead of simply reporting the time of his birth. It showed that he had some feng shui background. After getting the 8 characters of Mi Ding Cheng's father, I did a simple calculation and confirmed my previous guess. I didn't say much and just placed the paper in front of Liang Tianxin. "Taoist Liang, why don't you take a look at the life palace of Mi Ding Cheng's father?" Liang Tianxin was a heavenly master with profound feng shui knowledge. Of course, it was easy for him to read the 8 characters of Mi Ding Cheng's father. However, after a quick glance, he became silent. After 2 minutes, he said with a dark face, "The life palace hides dangers. The golden fire tribulation is difficult to live past the year of destiny." Confucius said, "Knowing the mandate of heaven at 50, it is difficult to live past the mandate of heaven." Naturally, he meant that Mi's father would not live past 50. The golden fire tribulation was the most ferocious of the 12 tribulations of the Fate Palace. It was not something that could be solved by humans. Hearing his conclusion, the expressions of the other feng shui masters changed as well. They all moved closer to check Papa Mi's horoscope. Then, each of them silently divined the horoscope. When they also divined the result, their expressions changed even more. They were dumbfounded and speechless. The 8 characters were an extremely important part of feng shui. Generally, when feng shui masters looked at feng shui, they would first look at the owner's 8 characters. However, the Mi family was moving their ancestral tombs, and Father Mi had passed away long ago, so no one checked his horoscope. The most cautious ones only looked at the horoscope of Mi Ding City. As for Liang Tianxin, he did not even go to the Mi family's graveyard. He only looked at a few photos and made his final conclusion. Seeing that they were speechless, I said, according to his horoscope, Papa Mi would not have a good death, and he would not have been able to build such a big business for the Mi family. Moreover, the Mi family's ancestral tomb is the Shunga Linjing dragon. Although it is an auspicious point, it needs the fate of the person buried there to support it. With Papa Mi's fate, it would not be able to support it. Even if we take a step back and say that the Shunga Linjing dragon doesn't need a fate to support it, this auspicious point would only bring Papa Mi some fortune. It would not be able to change his fate. After analyzing the situation, I turned to Liang Tianxin and asked, "Taoist Liang, do you think I'm just bluffing?" After hearing my words, Liang Tianxin's face became angry. However, in front of so many feng shui masters in Hong Kong, his identity as a heavenly master did not allow him to be unreasonable. He lowered his voice and said, "You're right. There is something suspicious about this. But what does it prove?" After acknowledging my words, Liang Tianxin immediately retorted, "Papa Mi's Fate Palace had a calamity, and it wasn't feng shui that could change it. Perhaps he had a fortuitous encounter that allowed him to escape the calamity. What does it have to do with what happened today?" After hearing his words, the other feng shui masters seemed to understand. They immediately supported him. Master Liang is right. Nothing is absolute. Although Papa Mi's Fate Palace is dangerous, he has a good death. Of course, there's a cause and effect. How can you be sure that it has something to do with the Mi family's ancestral tomb? Moreover, feng shui masters can change luck, but not fate. This is common knowledge in the feng shui world. You're just a kid from the mainland. Don't you know this? Changing luck, but not fate. I smiled. In the feng shui world, there was such a saying. Many feng shui masters believe that fate was determined when the heavenly Tao created things. It was not something that could be changed by human beings. However, they didn't know that when Tianxiang at the end of the Song dynasty wanted to create his own dragon's vein to change the fate of the country. If the fate of a country could be changed, why couldn't one's fate be changed? I said seriously, for ordinary feng shui masters, they only know how to change luck, but not fate. However, that senior wasn't an ordinary feng shui master. The crowd burst into an uproar. What a joke. Kid, you don't have any common sense at all. If that old beggar was really that powerful and could change fate, why didn't he change his fate first? That way, he wouldn't have to spend the rest of his life alone. Why would he need old Mr. Mi's help? You're full of nonsense. Ma Zhengkuan, who had been mocking me the whole time, was the first to speak. I looked at him with a smile. Feng shui masters can judge others, but not themselves. This is common knowledge. Old Mr. Ma says that I don't have common sense, but I can see that you don't have much common sense at your age. Ma Zhengkuan's face darkened, and his chest heaved up and down. It was obvious that he was angry. However, what he said just now was indeed a thoughtless remark. After being ridiculed by me, he couldn't say a single word. Shut up. Liang Tianxin waved his hand with a gloomy face. He stopped the others from speaking up for Ma Zhengquan. He turned to me and asked in a serious tone, "You said that the old beggar changed Mi's father's fate. What method did he use? Are these the graveyards?" "Yes, those are the graveyards." I nodded resolutely. "What's the reason?" Liang Tianxin asked again. I answered softly, "Good luck." As soon as I said those two words, the crowd burst into an uproar again. Ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Ma Zhengquan, who had been angered by me to the point of vomiting blood, was the first to stand up. He scolded me sternly. "You little servant, you really know how to pick up other people's words." When we first saw the old beggar's grave, I mentioned good luck. However, since it was the old beggar's grave and had nothing to do with the Mi family's ancestral grave, we didn't investigate further. Now you're using it to talk about this. No wonder Master Liang said that you were deliberately mystifying things. This old man really hated me. He was like a mad dog that wanted to bite me as soon as he got a chance. I didn't pay attention to him and just looked at Liang Tianxin. "What kind of good luck? Tell us." Liang Tianxin didn't comment, but his face became more solemn. I sighed. I had already said that the other feng shui masters didn't understand, but Liang Tianxin didn't understand either. I was a little disappointed. When I heard him talk about sand and water, I thought that his feng shui knowledge wasn't inferior to mine. But now, it seemed that he was too narrow-minded. I didn't want to waste time. I said in a clear voice, that year when the old man decided on the 5 graves, he used the luck-changing technique. However, he didn't change his own luck like what Mr. Ma said. He changed his father's luck. You've all seen those graves. Fellow Taoist Liang also analyzed the sand and water, explaining the good and bad of the sand in each grave. Just as fellow Taoist Liang said, the 4 graves had excellent feng shui, but they all had evil sand, so the good points became mediocre. However, I don't know if you've noticed the location of the evil sand in each grave. Location. Hearing my words, everyone was stunned. It was obvious that they hadn't thought about this before. Everyone, including Liang Tianxin, lowered their heads and began to calculate the locations. After a while, Liang Tianxin was the first to react. He said, "The evil sand in the 4 graves is in the astral brain." The astral brain. Hearing Liang Tianxin's words, the other feng shui masters who were calculating raised their heads. Their faces were full of shock, and they couldn't say anything. After a few minutes, the young man surnamed Huang was the first to speak. "These 4 graves, could it be that they're all hiding gold in the astral brain?" His words seemed to have lit a fuse. The 70 to 80 feng shui masters present all whispered to each other in shock. Astral brain hiding gold was a famous feng shui layout recorded in Li Chuanfeng's EC divination. Everyone knew about Li Chuanfeng's pushing back diagram, but they didn't know that he had another great work on metaphysics, which was this EC divination. Generally speaking, this book was about the art of astrology, but in it, there were 9 types of feng shui written about the stars and the earth. This astral brain hiding gold was one of the 9 types of feng shui. It wasn't a good or auspicious point at all, but a feng shui of absolute evil. Its degree of evil was extremely rare. According to the EC divination, this kind of feng shui would lead to the destruction of one's home and death. Although Liang Tianxin understood sand and water, he was too arrogant and hadn't gone to the site to investigate. It was impossible for him to determine the location based on just a few pictures, let alone recognize the true feng shui. The crowd discussed for a while, but in the end, it was Liang Tianxin who spoke with a cold expression. Astral brain hiding gold. Sand is gold. These 4 graves can indeed be called astral brain hiding gold. However, I still don't understand. Can you change Mi's father's fate with just astral brain hiding gold? I smiled. He really knew how to change the topic. Regardless of fate, the feng shui layout of astral brain hiding gold had overturned his previous view of sand and stone. He didn't mention this at all and only seized on the fact that I had changed my fate in an attempt to save his face. Unfortunately, his plan failed in the end. It's true that the astral brain hiding gold layout alone isn't enough to change one's fate. However, what fellow Taoist Liang doesn't know is that apart from these 4 graves, even the old Mister's burial place is also astral brain hiding gold. Not only that, but these 5 graves also naturally form the 5 elements. The old Mister's grave is at the gold position in the west, and the other 4 are arranged according to the southern fire, northern water, eastern wood, and middle earth. Due to the miraculous astral brain hiding gold layout, the 4 evil spirits gradually converge in the 5 elements direction and enter the old Mister's grave. Therefore, these 5 graves aren't the astral brain hiding gold layout, but... I paused and smiled at Liang Tianxin, changing the topic. Earlier, fellow Taoist Liang asked me if there was another formation here. Now, I can answer you. There's indeed a formation here. The old Mister used these 5 natural feng shui spots to set up an astral brain hiding gold array. Mi's father's life palace hid the gold and fire calamity. That year, the old Mister saw through Mi's father's fate and used his knowledge of feng shui to set up this reversal formation. He used the 5 evil spirits' lands to guide the gold evil spirits of the Mi family's ancestral energy to gather in his grave, thus resolving Mi's calamity and changing his fate. In other words, the old Mister received the Mi family's life-saving grace. After his death, he guided the Mi family's bad luck and the 5 isolated feng shui spots to his grave and shouldered them all. At the cost of bearing 5 times the bad luck, he changed the fate of the entire Mi family. After explaining the entire feng shui layout in one breath, I turned to look at all the feng shui masters present. I sneered and said again, "Your knowledge is shallow, yet you dare to claim that feng shui can change fortune but not fate?" To borrow fellow Taoist Liang's words, how ignorant and arrogant you are. Chapter 471. In the book E.C. Divination, there was metal hidden in the divinity, the locations of several evil sands in the feng shui patterns, the fate of the Mi family's father, and the current situation of the Mi family. All these clues connected together to explain the Mi family's ancestral grave. All the feng shui masters in Hong Kong, including Liang Tianxin, couldn't refute my words. After I concluded that Hong Kong's feng shui wasn't as profound as that of the mainland, the feng shui masters who had been arguing with each other didn't dare to argue anymore. At this moment, everyone's arrogance was completely suppressed. In the end, Liang Tianxin stood up. His face was filled with shame and shock. He sighed and said to me, "Feng shui originated from the mainland and has influenced the entire East Asia. Although the feng shui community of the mainland has suffered many disasters in recent years, just like what this fellow Taoist said, the mainland is still the mainland. Its foundation and structure are not something that Hong Kong can compare with. We, the feng shui masters of Hong Kong, have lost to the Mi family's feng shui. He was a heavenly master after all, so he was more tolerant than the others. At this moment, he knew he couldn't argue anymore, so he directly admitted defeat. This way, he would appear more upright. Seeing him admit defeat, the other Hong Kong feng shui masters looked even more embarrassed. Their moods also sank. They were no longer as excited as before. Ma Jingquan was the only one who didn't want to admit defeat. He said to me, "The feng shui of the mainland and Hong Kong have different styles. The feng shui formation of the evil sand in the evil sand was set up by the feng shui masters of the mainland. Of course, you're more familiar with it than me. What does that prove? Moreover, you've only explained the origin of the feng shui formation. Let me ask you, since the evil sand in the evil sand is protected by the feng shui formation, why did the Mi family suffer this time? How can we solve this problem? Aside from the part where he pestered endlessly at the beginning, the problem he raised at the end was real. The feng shui masters of Hong Kong seemed to have found a fig leaf to hide their embarrassment, and they all chimed in agreement. That's right. This amazing feng shui formation was set up by the feng shui masters of the mainland. Of course, the feng shui masters of the mainland are more familiar with it. I don't think so. What he said about the formation can't explain what happened to the Mi family recently. I'm afraid even Master Liang has been deceived by him. This kid is talking nonsense. Everyone has a herd mentality. If there's only one person standing in front of me right now, then no one would dare to refute my well-founded argument. However, it would be different if there were more people. With Ma Zhengquan taking the lead, the others immediately started to shamelessly say things that deceived themselves and others. Liang Tianxin was not as shameless as Ma Zhengquan, who said things like, "It's normal that the Hong Kong feng shui master did not recognize the formation set up by a mainland feng shui master." However, he also took advantage of the situation and said in a low voice, "Today, we're here to solve the Mi family's crisis. Since this mainland fellow Taoist can recognize the gang brain 5 metals formation, I'm sure you can find the real reason for the Mi family's disaster and help Mr. Mi solve the crisis." I smiled. Liang Tianxin's previous actions seemed to be straightforward, but I still wanted to struggle a little bit. It was just like what he said. We were here to solve the Mi family's crisis. If we couldn't solve the Mi family's problem, it would be meaningless for me to recognize the gang brain 5 metals formation. Hearing him, Mi Dingqing also clasped his hands at me and said sincerely, "Please, young master, if our Mi family can survive this disaster, we won't forget your kindness." With just a few words, they had turned the situation around. If I couldn't solve the Mi family's problem, they would overturn the theory of the gang brain 5 metals formation. Then, they would criticize the mainland's feng shui world. I didn't say anything, but picked up the picture of the 5 cemeteries and gave it to Mi Ding Cheng. Then, I asked him, "Mr. Mi, look at this picture." Mi Ding Cheng was bewildered. He turned to look at Liang Tianxin and said to me, "Although I like feng shui, I don't know much about it. How can I see anything?" I shook my head. "Mr. Mi, you don't need to look at feng shui. You just need to look at the connection between the 5 cemeteries." Mi Ding Cheng still didn't understand, but he still took the picture and looked at it carefully. Around half a minute later, he lifted his head and said with uncertainty, "Between the 5 cemeteries, there are trees that are connected." I smiled and nodded. "That's right. The 5 cemeteries are connected by trees. These trees, is there something special about them?" Mi Ding Cheng didn't understand. "Of course." I smiled and nodded. Taoist Liang once said that the river's rotation is feng shui. When a stone stands in a pond, it's also feng shui. Although feng shui is invisible, it's related to physics. For example, gas and heat need a medium to move. Feng shui also needs a medium to move. Rivers and trees are the best medium to move feng shui. In this dipper 5 metal formation, the other 4 golden dipper, fiendish dipper, are gathered at the dipper, and the place where the old mister is buried is also the tiger palm heavenly dipper ominous point, and this path of trees is the circulation path of the fiendish golden dipper. Mr. Mi, take a look at the tree connecting the tiger palm heavenly spirit acupoint to the Shangha Linzhanglong acupoint where your father was buried. Is there a shortcut? Hearing this, Mi Ding Cheng hurriedly picked up the photo and looked at it carefully again. There's indeed a shortcut. Is this the reason why our Mi family is facing this disaster? That's right. Your Mi clan's fortune comes from this 5 elements of dipper brain formation. Now that the 5 elements of dipper brain formation is cut off, the 5 elements of dipper brain formation is obstructed. Without its protection, the Mi clan's original ominous feng shui has gained the upper hand. That's why you've suffered so many disasters. After listening to my explanation, Mi Ding Cheng sighed. His face was full of regret. He slapped his thigh and said regretfully, "When my father became rich, he spent a lot of money to buy a large piece of land where the old mister mentioned the location of the 5 tombs. Before he passed away, he asked me to keep this piece of land and not touch it. Many years have passed, and Hong Kong has developed better and better. Every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. I don't know how many people have coveted this piece of land. I still remember my father's request, so I haven't touched this piece of land. However, 2 years ago, because of the government's land issue, the chief executive came to me and asked me to use a part of the land. I couldn't refuse him, so I touched that piece of land. I didn't want to leave behind a disaster. The more me Ding Ching talked, the more regretful he felt. He looked at me and asked, "Mister, what should we do now? Do we just need to patch up the trees to solve the problem?" I nodded. After we patch up the trees, we can maintain the operation of the 5 astral brain array. However, since the new trees are different from the old ones, it will take several years for the 5 astral brain array to recover completely. Before the 5 astral brain array is fully restored, the fortune of the Mi family's ancestors will be affected. But at least they won't have any more disasters. Mi Ding Chung gritted his teeth and made his decision. I only hope that there won't be any disasters. I don't dare to ask for more good fortune. I'm going to contact the chief executive and ask him to take back that piece of land. You don't need to take it all back. Mr. Me, you just need to make sure that the astral energy tunnel is still there. The surrounding land won't affect the formation, I advised him. Although I didn't know the specific situation, the chief executive had told him about it. Moreover, it was the government's land, and Mi Ding Chung had agreed to it. It wouldn't be easy for him to go back on his words. However, I guess Mi Ding Chung was frightened by this disaster. He nodded and thanked me for my good intentions. Then he insisted on taking back that piece of land. At this moment, the Mi family's problem was finally solved. All the geomancers in Hong Kong, including Liang Tianxin, wore dark faces. They didn't dare to say a word. Of course, Mi Ding Chung was very grateful to me. He sincerely asked me to stay and help him fix the astral energy tunnel to avoid any more problems. I agreed to help him to the end. However, I had to pay a price for helping him. I smiled and told him, "I have to take the 2 7-star mugwort leaves from you." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.